Good afternoon. How you doing, everybody? This is your coach Renz, and welcome to Deconstructing Christianity. And tonight we're going to take a little divergent. We're going to talk about another subject matter that I talk about quite often, actually, mentioning in many videos about previous civilizations. Previous civilization, which is where most of our stories actually come from. And tonight we're going to talk about the Isle of Mew. We're going to talk about Lemuria, Sunderland, and of course, Atlantis. So buckle your seat belts. We're going to get into this a little bit later on. Give us about 5 minutes to get started. Let everybody get on board here. Yes, there are some pictures that I forgot to go ahead and get ready, but we're going to get those ready while we are having our build-up time frame. Thank you, Tim, for already being here. My guy Tim, always on time, always trying to keep me straight. But we are going to, so just ignore these images that I'm putting up right now. Ignore these images. I just have to load them all to the platform real quick. So don't pay attention to them. What's up, Sean? How we doing? Facebook and YouTube is working perfectly fine. I can see that since we got comments from both sources. But we are going to have a conversation that I know that I'm going to enjoy, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as well. Like I said, I got some images that I may possibly use throughout the course of this. So I'm grabbing them right now. Yes, I should have did this earlier. But que sera, sera. It is what it is. Trying to do it quick so you won't see it. So Tim, you like this conversation? You're gonna like this conversation? All right, good. That's what I'm talking about. And one of the things that we're going to discover tonight is why I promote the idea that most likely there were previous civilizations on Earth prior to the Younger Dryas flood, the previous ice age, and that is where most of our stories of religion that people are believing in come from. That the gods are not aliens, but just previous earthen civilizations that existed beforehand. So get yourselves ready. That's all the document. I don't think I'm gonna use anything other than those pictures. So I look forward to hearing you guys' thoughts and opinions on everything that we talk about tonight. Get my notes lined up, even though I didn't write that many notes. So I'm gonna be going off the top of the dome for the majority of this. Top of the dome is where we're going. So if I make any mistakes, I have no problems with corrections. Now, if you are new to the channel, we deconstruct Christianity is our main thing. If you look in the first comments that I posted on here that I posted on May the 4th, so May the 4th be with you, we will be doing a 3-hour seminar. That 3-hour webinar we will discuss the facts behind the flood. And this story here is actually a little bit part of, it's going to be part of that discussion that we have on May the 4th, as well as many others. I posted a video about 30 minutes ago talking about irits. And so you want to know what irits are, go to that video that I posted about 30 minutes ago. But you'll find the link to the Eventbrite so you can get your ticket for this webinar. We're only going to have a limited number of people that are going to be allowed on it. So if you want to dive into the science and the fictions and the stories and how these stories came about concerning Noah's flood and all the other worldwide floods, that video is something that seminar is something that you want to be a part of. So I look forward to that. And there will be many other seminars, and not just on spirituality. I will figure out a date soon after. I'm going to figure out a date, but soon after that webinar, I am going to do a financial webinar. If we are deconstructing from this religion, what we cannot show is lack. So we're going to work on our full capacity of ourselves. So there will be a financial seminar that will be coming up very soon after that. And one of the reasons is that hopefully, and let me go ahead and say, if you decide that you want to come onto the webinar and you are simply there to there will be no refunds after the seminar starts. But if you come onto that seminar, let it be known that if you are coming there only to be a troll, you will be dismissed from the seminar, or at minimum, you'll be silenced through the whole thing. I might let you listen to the whole thing, and you will just simply be silenced. So if you think you're going to come on there and be a troll, you have a whole nother thing going. I want to thank you. We got people who have purchased cigars from my wife. This is not one of her hand rolls, but we have her other hand rolls. I want to thank those who have purchased her hand roll cigars. Hopefully you guys are enjoying those. They went to the email. Just email me at masteringyou10, and you'll be able to get those cigars. For those who support the channel this way, I greatly appreciate you. And those who support the channel by being members, by being subscription holders on members on YouTube, subscription holders on Facebook, and those who are subscribers and share the videos and are always here. I want to thank you guys for being here. You may sign up. You may sign up. All you got to do is click on the link and purchase your ticket, and you can sign up. And relative to your statements, you may be heard. I am not guaranteeing it. If you are simply trolling with a bunch of Jesus saves us, Jesus is the Lord, that it will not be tolerated. I have no problems with people who have disagreements, but simple trolling with no intellect behind it is a waste of our time. And for the people who are there because they desire to be there to gain more information on their process of deconstructing, I welcome those people. They have way more value. So Prima, although you have been invited to come onto the show many times and have never done so, to my recollect, maybe you have, you are more than welcome to join us. People always claim their receipts. The Bible is not receipts. That is for damn sure. The Bible is in no way, shape, or form receipts. So, well, we're well past the 5-minute mark, so we're going to go ahead and begin this discussion concerning how many of you right now, let me ask the question, how many of you have, I know most of y'all have heard of the city of Atlantis, but how many of you have heard of Mu, the Isle of Mu, or the continent of Mu rather, or Lemuria or Sunderland? How many of you have heard of those places, Mu, Lemuria, or Sunderland? You know what? There is one more picture that I want to find real quick while you guys are answering that question. It just dawned on me that would be a good one. I hope I spelled his name wrong. I probably did not. Might be him. I don't know how to spell that name. Found him anyway. There is one other person I want to add to this. One more image that I would like to add. Let me grab his name. Don't forget Hyperborea. You're gonna have to educate me on that one. I don't recall anybody ever coming and bringing information that I could not refute. So I'm gonna say that's false because Maybe you just didn't accept the reality of the answer, but you brought information that could not be refuted. Nah, I doubt that very seriously. I do remember you coming on though. I remember seeing your name once, but and I'm not trying to be funny, but it wasn't memorable. If someone provided information and I said, okay, hey, you win or whatever, I would remember that. That I do not remember. So let's get started. Let's get started. Oh, you were the one with the, okay, hold on. Sometimes I need a little spark of information to remember something. And so, yes, you brought some information about some solar eclipse. Solar eclipse. Ah, damn, I do remember something of that. You brought on something about some solar eclipse. Solar eclipse. What the hell were we talking about that solar eclipse would have mattered? Would have been more than likely we would have been talking about Joshua. Let's see, solar eclipse. I do remember there was something that you brought on about solar eclipse. Oh, this is going to bother me. This is literally going to bother me. I know we're supposed to be having our conversation uh, about Mu and Lemuria and Atlantis, but that is going to bother me because it's like right at the tip of my brain. Something about some solar eclipse, which I'm pretty sure you did not. It wasn't something that was irrefutable. Something about some solar eclipse. I looked up what you just put up there, and nothing is coming up about your Endymion records. You sure you? I'm not getting anything for what you said about Endymion, whatever that records are. I get nothing, so I'm going to say no to that. The Bible timeline records. What's up, Rad? JW, how you doing? Trauma, welcome. Isaac, the Bible timeline records. Yeah, you're not giving enough information for me to remember right now. And so with that, I'm not going to get distracted. Not going to get distracted. We have a subject matter that we're going to talk about, and we're damn sure going to talk about this subject matter tonight. I go live every Monday. So if you find me for the first time, I go live every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We skipped yesterday, had a pre-arranged engagement. But in order to talk about Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, although many people may want to start with Plato and Plato's record of when Atlantis was destroyed and all the events surrounding that. I have live guests all the time. If every night we can have live guests, but definitely after we finish the subject matter, if it's not pertaining to the subject matter that we're speaking of. So tonight, if you want to come on live about the subject matter we're talking about, and then afterwards, if we're talking about something else, you are more than welcome to. That is how we do the show. But to start out, we have to start out with this gentleman, Philip Sclater. Philip Sclater is a very important person when it comes to the whole ideas of Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, and so on and so forth. The reason why in the 1850s, he published a system of devising the animal world that we still use today, like don't know why I'm trying to say that word. Australistic. Anyway, there were different ways we categorize the different animals, and I can't even say how the Australopithecus or something like that is one of the categories of animals. And then he had the category of animals from South America and Africa and Asia. But then he ran into a problem. The problem that he ran into was the fact that when he saw skeletal remains, fossilized skeletal remains of lemurs, he found them in South America. He found them in Africa. He also found them in India and Australia and in Southwest Asia. Now, what was problematic about that is that lemurs are an animal that can't swim. There was no sign of transporting these animals from one to another, and usually when animals exist and have an identical structure to them, there is usually some methodology that they were able to travel. So what Philip Sclater proposed was the isle of a lost continent called Lemuria. Now, I don't know if Sclater was a reader of Plato. I would assume that he might have been a reader of Plato and understood the ideas of Atlantis. And Plato didn't just write about Atlantis, but he also talked about a lost continent that would be known as Lemuria and Mute, and actually Sunderland as well. And although every map of this situation is not perfect, because there are varying ideas of the stretches of these continents, because we also have the lost continent, the continental shelf crust of Mauritania, is rather problematic because just like our seas are some of the most undiscovered lands that we have on the planet. As much as we are looking into space, we should be looking under the water. I appreciate that, Wayne, but I have sworn off going live on TikTok because TikTok keep on shutting me down because of they allow bullies to do so. But yes, I do see a lot of other people going live on TikTok about deconstructing Christianity. So King Julian from Madagascar was a lemur. Exactly. So if you're unfamiliar what a lemur is, then think of in Madagascar, the Madagascar movie, King Julian is a lemur. So he could not find the connection. So when he looked at the fact that these lemurs existed in the same structure, the same genotype, had the same genetic makeup based on fossilized records in all these different lands, what he concluded was that there was a sunken continent. Now that sunken continent was a thing of fantasy for most people in the 1800s and in the early 1900s. But in the early 1900s, you also had this idea backed up by people like James Churchward, Madame Blavatsky, Chan Thomas, Charles Lyles, Edgar Casey, and Daniel Fry. Now, some of these people later were discredited in other areas. For instance, Daniel Fry claimed that he had pictures of alien ships, and those proved to be a forgery. He failed polygraphs. We know that Madame Blavatsky, once other theosophists started making more money than her, she started to falsify claims as well, which discredited her from many of her previous writings. So many of these people ended up giving in to the monetary aspects of things and discredited their careers by doing so. But even in them being discredited, there are certain scientific things that we have discovered that would lead you to the idea that at least in those parts, as far as talking about the possibility of Mu, Lemuria, and Atlantis, that these places actually once existed. And they would have existed prior to the last ice age. So they would have existed 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. Now, some of these things is what we're going to go through today to be able to define whether or not there was a civilization. Now, the stories of their destructions and why they're not around and what happened, that's where we're going to get more into possibilities, and where are many of the biblical stories and the Indus stories and all these other religious stories have created their gods, as well as created their ideas of floods and other catastrophes that happen on the planet. Now, when you go and search, like I said, you're going to find various different versions of this. When you look at this map, you see that Lemuria goes all the way up to Hawaii, over to Easter Island, far south of Australia into Tonga, and as far over to the west as close to Japan. These land masses can also be, you will see other maps where that land mass is also called Mu. And Mu also incorporate, that land mass is called Mu. Now, one of the reasons why those land masses where it says Lemuria on this map is called Mu is because there are ancient Polynesian, ancient Tongan, ancient Hawaiian stories of this land mass being called Mu, and the people was a once great continent of people who were extremely advanced in civilizations. Now, in that Pacific landmass that they call Mu, that on this map is called Lemuria, they spoke of alien beings coming from the Pleiades who were in those lands and had greater technology. Now, we know that any group of people who have a technology greater than the average community can be declared gods. It is unlikely in our world today that if someone came and they displayed great technological advancement that we would denote them as a god. But 6,000 years ago, you're a god. If you went back in time and you had an iPhone and it was able to work, you would be a god to those people. Our medical technologies today, if you was able to, you're a god. Our weaponry today, go back 6,000 years and you are a god. So therefore, when we look at this, for them to say that they came from the Pleiades is where I say no. But to suggest that they were an advanced civilization that was an earthen-born civilization is where I would find agreement. So well, on this map, where you have Lemuria, some of the connections that they have, which is Mu, some of the connections that they had with these people is one of the facts is that there must have been some contact between these people and the people in the Mediterranean vicinity. And when we look at where Lemuria is actually, the landmass called Lemuria actually is located, which let me bring that map up for you. We see that Lemuria actually connected Madagascar up into India and down into Australia. So if you combine if you can combine the thought process of where Australia is, Madagascar, and southern India, and you know that there was contact between the people in India to the people in the Mediterranean, it will be feasible for you to understand how in places like Tonga, is that the Tongan people? Let me make sure I got it right. No, in Easter Island, the people of Easter Island, which is a desolate little island in the middle of the middle of the Pacific, where once lived 12,000 people. And you have to wonder, how did those 12,000 people get there? Where modern scientists, they would say that they just sailed there on canoes, on boats. But what would make it even easier if there was a landmass that connected this area, and they just simply walked there, which would also explain why the lemurs were able to get from one to another, and then just at that point, a boat could take them to South America, but they would be able to connect to throughout Easter Island and all these areas. But of course, this image of Lemuria, you can see how lemurs could have traveled from Madagascar to India to Australia, and they would still be the same. And they've also found that there were certain monkeys that share similarities between monkeys from Madagascar and monkeys in South America. So with Mu that connection, how Mu connects to near Australia, and Lemuria would have been in between in the Indian Ocean, there would still provide a landmass by which that they were able to go from, and a very short ocean voyage, to say the least, to get to South America. So this is why the lemurs are found in each one of those places. Like I said, in this map where it says Lemuria, think of that as Mu. Where it says Mu, what you really should think about is a landmass called Sunderland. This is why Sunderland is in the title. What they have found is that Sunderland, once before the Younger Dryas flood, and remember the Younger Dryas flood provided that the sea levels was at least 400 feet. There was a 400 feet regression of sea level. Now this has nothing to do with depths of the ocean, but a regress in sea level of 400 feet could just make mountain valleys dry. So the depth actually doesn't have a lot to do with it. And by making those mountain valleys dry, you have Sunderland, which would bring us to a point of understanding how Gung Padam, which Gung Padam has been discovered to be, this is a better picture actually, this is the picture that I wanted, that it is the world's oldest step pyramid. The core sampling from Gung Padam have produced that the step pyramid there were at least somewhere in the neighborhood of around 20,000 years ago. This would coincide with the ice age and the land and the water recession, the water receding 400 feet. And there was a magnificent step pyramid that was built there. And in that step pyramid, as you look at the top left-hand corner, they use LiDAR to be able to just tell that they had a sewer system and a methodology of pumping fresh water into the surrounding areas much earlier than anybody else in our world history has ever been able to provide. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to take that away yet. What is the relationship between Pangea and the lost continent? Is there any relationship, or is Pangea too old? Or are we talking reality versus mythology? So Pangea would come about as part of this whole scenario, in that those land masses, although they would not have been fully exposed, but when Pangea happened and the continents began to drift, that there was a continent that was a lost continental shelf in Mauritania that would have sunken under the water once the India started moving up towards Asia. Let me get back to this map so you can have a better so you can see it visually. When India started moving up towards Asia, and if you see what Madagascar is, about off the coast of Madagascar is the island of Mauritania. From Mauritania, they discovered that there was a huge continental shelf crust, a huge continental crust that exists there that is now completely underwater. During Pangea, it would have remained and been flooded under the water, but when the last ice age began to occur, all of that landmass would have then been revealed, and therefore you would have had another the landmass to help build the connections to create Lemuria. So Pangea plays a part in it, in the fact that when the Indian subcontinent started moving away, it allowed for that continental crust to show itself underwater initially, but then rise above the water with the last ice age, but then of course recede back under. Now there could have been plenty of time frames where that landmass was above water, because based on based on Charles Lyell proposed that our Earth goes through a cycle of where the crust displacement and continents rise and continents falls. So there could have been multiple times that the Mauritanian continent which is part of Lemuria, would have been above water and then sink below water, above water, sink below water. Now, the people in that region, they tell stories of this happening, where you have the Tramo people, who are Southern Indian people, where they tell a story of a city called Darkwa. And that city of Darkwa was a magnificent city that had all sorts of great technology. But then during the Younger Dryas flood, that city was sunken as well. And this all thought to be myths until I believe around the 1980s, they actually found Darkwa. And once they found it, they realized that there was such an underwater city. Now, underwater cities are not uncommon for us to find today, although there's a lot of speculation about the Bimini Road. What we did find underneath the waters of Cuba was completely a sunken city. At first, it was believed that this sunken city was just natural rock formations, but the more and more it has been discovered, and it lies about 2,000 feet below the water, that this is actually a sunken city. It is not a natural phenomenon, but it is a created phenomenon. And as you can see, this sunken city displays pyramid structures, which is not uncommon to find pyramid structures all over the world, because that is the most common structure that people will build. Right? So this was found underneath the waters in Cuba. So every time I say that people, and now every time I say these things, do not get me confused with the ancient astronaut theorist. I do not accept the ancient astronaut theorist at all. But it is more of previous earthen civilizations that existed during that time frame, prior to the last cataclysm that destroyed much of the earth and the overwhelming majority of the population. Because just like today, how the majority of the population lives coastal, at any given time frame of any civilization, we live coastal. We constantly live coastal. You look at the population structure of the United States today, and the overwhelming majority of people live on the East Coast, and the overwhelming majority of people on the East Coast live closer to water than they do in the inland areas. So there are temples under the water off the coast of India, that Darkwa. I think I'm pronouncing the city right, but Darkwa is that city. I believe that we're talking about the same city of Darkwa that is found underneath the waters there. Yeah, I do not want to be associated with that guy, especially because they are just as bad as religious people, as they have already come to a they have a preconceived idea of what it is. Everything they look at has to be aliens, when it's simply the most simplest answer, Occam's razor, is that it was a previous civilization that existed on the planet, and that civilization was wiped out for whatever reason. And we're going to get into those reasons in a few minutes. In a few minutes, we'll get to it. Now, of course, there was also Atlantis. The one that most people are most captivated by is the idea of Atlantis. That Atlantis existed somewhere off the coast of Africa, or on the neck of Africa, or in the Caribbean. And maybe the city that was found off the coast of Cuba would represent that, or maybe the Bimini Road area would represent the Atlantis area. And some people look at the Eye of Africa and say that that was Atlantis. And there is certainly some credibility can be offered to any one of those as to where Atlantis was. Plato was writing, telling the world what his grandfather had told him. And I'm sure that Philip Sclater understood those same stories as well. But at the end of the day, we don't have much evidence for the city of Atlantis. We have yet to discover anything about Atlantis. But The stories include Atlantis when it comes to the destruction of Lemuria and the destruction of Mu. So Atlantis plays a part in the story, so we have to add the story. And let me correct something real quick. Oh no, that was right. I said it right. That was Gun Padam. That's part of Gun Padam as well. But those the basalt structures in Gun Padam, which is in micro Indonesia, demonstrates that some level of man's technological advancement had produced a civilization, structures that were far ahead of anyone in the known history that we have. Now, there is one other structure that we have to look at and we have to recognize. So when we look at what they claim Mu to be, which on this map is listed as Lemuria, all the way over to the far west of this, near the island of Japan, which is some of the most concrete evidence that we can find. And I'm gonna try to say this right. Matter of fact, let me bring up one of the pictures. But the Yanganaguni monument. I don't speak Japanese, so leave me alone. But the Yanganaguni monument demonstrates that they found off the coast of the Yanganaguni off the coast of Japan, demonstrates large step structures that are most assuredly not naturally made. That these structures are certainly carved out structures that they found deep under the waters. Oh, and Sean was asking, continents that look like a puzzle. Right. So these haven't been dated yet. Dating underwater structures, you can imagine, are more difficult, is just as difficult, if not more difficult, than dating structures that we have above water. Getting core samples, and then like with the movement of water and the movement of sea life and plant life and all sorts of things, these are become a little bit harder to date. So as of right now, I could not find a dating time frame for these. But based on the stories that the people of that region and the people throughout the Pacific talk about this, about Yanganani, the Y structure, it is certainly right around the 9,000 BCE time frame to about 20,000 BCE. It is the wide birth of time. Now, although your ancient astronauts theorists will say that, oh, these things were built for giants, that would be like looking at the Great Pyramids of Giza and saying that those were built for giants because they use large stones. But simply because the stones are large and they're set up like large steps does not necessarily mean that they were built for giants. We actually have no idea who built them and when they built them and why they built them, because those discoveries are a lot harder to excavate considering that they're underwater. And it takes a lot more time, money to do so. And of course, money is hard to get when it doesn't produce a return on that investment. And that is one of the reasons why underwater discoveries are not as prolific as above water discoveries. But these formations makes you have to at least admit that somebody built those long time ago when this was not underwater. There will be no purpose for anyone to build these underwater. But then how were they destroyed? Well, it's quite easy for us to just go ahead and look at the basic information of it. The basic information as provided by Chan Thomas, Charles Lyles, James Churchward, Madame Blavatsky, Edgar Casey, and all these other people. And there's many, many more who discuss these things. There are multiple stories as to why, how they were destroyed, but there are some things that are common. One of the most common, one of the commonalities between all the stories is that the last great ice age certainly put a damper on society. That society has moved closer to the equator, following the animals, following the warmer air, but most of them move closer to society, to the equator. For those who were surviving ice age, this was all about survival. Now, as they move closer, of course, in and around the 15,000 years ago, there was, as the air and everything was getting warmer, a huge freeze happened. And this is called the Younger Dryas freeze. So for about the next 3,000 years, it got colder than it ever was for the previous portions of this ice age that had already been lasting about 20,000 years. When it got extremely cold, more ice covered the planet, more land more land was exposed. But during that 3,000 year period, more and more people died and more people moved into these centralized locations. It is believed that these people of Lemuria, Mu, and Atlantis were a greater technological civilization that were able to harness earthen energy. Like, we are not able to do that yet. We cannot use the warmth of the core of the planet. We can't use volcanic energy to produce energy for our use. We were incapable of that right now. But it is believed that these civilizations were closer to a level 1 world. I was going to say type 1, but I think it's called level 1, a level 1 world than what we are today. So with them being able to utilize sound and frequency and utilize the energies of the earth in a more advanced way than we were, those civilizations on those islands were certainly the powerhouses of the day. They were your United States, China, Russia of the day. So according to the base model, the most basic versions of their destruction, there's two, one man-made, one natural. In the man-made idea, in the natural, I want to get to the man-made last because that goes into all the biblical stuff and all the other religious stuff. In the natural order of things, it is thought of one of two things happened that caused the destruction of the planet at that time frame and caused this extinction level event. The first one is, I'm gonna say first, but one is a meteorite struck the earth near its polar caps. The intensity of the heat of a above ground burst of this, and those above ground bursts, as many of them think, created such a heat wave across the planet that the ice caps, all the ice that was on land, vanished, melted within 6 days. And this 6-day melting created a situation. I said two, but I mean, no, well, actually the other one, no, there's three naturals. The melting of that ice created tsunamis that flooded the northern hemisphere especially, but the overwhelming majority of the world in 6 days. That 400 feet of rescinded water all came crashing back within 6 days. So if you understand how ice works, ice age works, and I'll give you a brief description. You see, when we look at the polar caps now, if you look at an iceberg that's sitting in water, in the ocean, if that iceberg melts, it's not going to cause any rise of sea level. Well, it's going to cause very minimal rise of sea level. Next to nothing. It is like if you put ice in a glass, you fill that glass with water. As the ice melts, the level of the water really doesn't change. It stays the same because the displacement of volume that of the ice within the cup of water will still maintain the same as it melts. Okay. Now, if you took a glass of water and you put a little piece of wood on top, and you filled it, well, you filled it with water, you put a little glass, put a little piece of wood on top, and then you put some ice on that wood. This won't work actually, because the wood would have to go all the way to the bottom of the glass. So the wood needs to go all the way to the bottom of the glass. Fill it with water. Put a piece of ice on top of that wood. The ice wouldn't be heavy enough. The ice can't be heavy enough to cause the wood to go down. If the ice on top of the wood, which is representing land, were to melt, it would cause the water to overflow the glass. That's how an ice age works. All the ice that accumulated, all that water that was caught up in the, evaporated, turned into snow, landed on the land, but did not melt and return back to the rivers and lakes and then eventually the ocean. That cycle being disrupted by an ice age, the ocean regresses. But once all of that melts, all that water comes back and the sea level returns back to where it was previously. And this is what happened with the Younger Dryas flood around 9,000 to 10,000 BCE, somewhere around that time frame. Well, actually from 9,000 to 12,000 BCE, somewhere around that time frame, all this ice melts. And when all this ice melts, all these civilizations and these low-lying islands like Mu and Lemuria, they all are flooded. They all go away. Now, you can imagine if Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, all this stuff, Sunderland, was all built on land that was close to the water at the time frame of the water being gone, then it all is destroyed. The second idea is that there was a massive solar flare activity. And this massive solar flare activity didn't strip away, but greatly depleted our ozone layer, messed up our magnetic poles. Well, depleted the ozone layer first, and depleted the ozone layer. And that depletion of the ozone layer, and you know you can go with the Anunnaki with that one, depleted that, and then the intense heat from not having the atmospheric protection caused all the ice to melt and then flooded the planet, and all those civilizations were then destroyed. The third natural situation is a pole shift. Now, a pole shift is really more theory than reality, and it would be hard, from my knowledge right now, it is hard for our scientists to be able to prove whether a pole shift happened or can happen. Well, this can happen, but whether or not it's actually ever happened before. Now, in a pole shift situation, basically North Pole, South Pole reverse themselves, move, and the planet's tilt changes. The whole orientation of the planet changes. It isn't strong as it used to be. How long did the ice age last? So the last ice age is believed to have started somewhere between 30 to 50,000 years ago. Well, around 30 to 50,000 BCE, put it that way. Between 30 to 50,000 BCE is when it started. The Younger Dryas freeze started around 15,000 BCE. The Younger Dryas flood happened somewhere between 9 to 12,000 BCE. I can't stand my neighbors sometimes. Hold on, let me close this window. That should decrease some of that sound. Is that still loud? I left the window cracked. Let me know if that's too loud. And so the Younger Dryas flood would have happened between 9,000 and 12,000 BCE time frame. So when this whole solar flare, when this continental, I was talking about the continent, yeah. When this pole shift happened, the pole shift created a situation where relatively most of the volcanoes on the planet erupted. And as all these volcanoes erupted, with all the heat and the ash that was thrown in the air, it would have melted all the ice. Now, the only problem I have with that one is that if every volcano on the planet erupted, we would go back into another deep freeze, because all of that ash, it's my neighbor who got his blower, and I'm on this side of the room. House is on the side where of that neighbor. So, can you guys still hear it? Now, that is the least likely rationale to me, because there would have been another ice age that would have followed with that much ash in the air, if all the volcanoes on the planet were to erupt. If you can imagine, if the Yosemite volcano erupted, if the underwater caldera under Naples, or next to Naples, were to erupt, those two massive super volcanoes by themselves would throw the Earth into a little semi-ice age, because the ash clouds would pretty much cover the Earth. So, if it was a natural event, I am more inclined to the meteor, starburst, or solar flare activity that caused the flooding, which destroyed these civilizations. Now, because of the Anunnaki stories, because of the Indus story, and some of the other stories from around the world, the ancient stories of gods fighting and gods having wars, there is another story. Now, this story suffers from the fact that people like Madame Blavatsky and Daniel Fry and Edgar Casey, they utilize this story as their explanation of how these civilizations were destroyed. That the Younger Dryas flood was not caused by natural events, but actually was caused by man. So according to their story, what had happened was Atlantis, being the more aggressive nation, decided that it wanted the resources of Lemuria and Mu. Now, Atlantis had utilized the Earth energies to create weapons. Now, there are some who will go to the lengths of saying that one of the things that they tried to create was a false Merkaba, but that is getting a little too woo-woo, in my opinion. That they tried to create a false Merkaba on Mars that failed, and so the Martians came down to Earth, integrated with the people of Atlantis, and when they integrated with the people of Atlantis, especially those in Udal, they then created a false Merkaba, and that false Merkaba destroyed the planet. Again, and caused the Atlanteans to become more warlike. That one, it leans into more of the tablets, the emerald tablets of Atlantis, the emerald tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, which I don't trust the work of Doriel when it comes to that. But in Bimini Road, Devil's Triangle, all kinds of weird stuff underwater there, all kinds of weird, yes. And Edgar Casey did say that Atlantis would rise again, and Edgar Casey spoke of Bimini Road before the Bimini Road was discovered. He suggested that Atlantis was in Bimini before it was discovered. I missed something. Are Lemurian and Atlantis rings around the ocean basin, where the ocean shells and they got buried away by the water? The picture had water inside of the outlines. Yes, the way that the Atlantis was described by Plato was that there were 3 rings of canals surrounding Atlantis, which is why people look at the Eye of Africa and think that it was Atlantis. Now, the description of Plato merely is just talking about the capital city of Atlantis. But the theory proposed by most is that Atlantis itself was this huge continent that was inside in the what we know now as the Atlantic Ocean. So The Atlanteans, just through corrupt politicians, which we know is not uncommon, just decided that they wanted to take the resources of Sunderland, Mu, and Lemuria. And in doing so, the Lemurians had not created the weaponry that Atlantis had created by using earthen energy. And so when they decided that they were going to attack, Atlantis attacked with what we today would call nuclear weaponry. Now, when you read the Anunnaki story, it would seem to follow that line, because in the Anunnaki story, it talks about Enlil being at war against Marduk, and during that war, he lobbed nuclear weapons at Marduk, which created a nuclear winter, nuclear storms, that you had radiation clouds that were moving across the planet. This hot intensity of the radiation clouds then began to melt all of that ice that had formed during the last ice age. Now, Lemuria not having the weaponry, they decided to hide. Some of them hid in Agatha, which people who look at Antarctica would call that Agatha, beyond the ice wall. But others say that the Lemurians went in, when their land was destroyed by the Atlanteans, that they went and hid in what we call today Mount Shasta. And of course, you may know that there's many stories in about Mount Shasta, of seeing aliens, of this prospector of gold, this guy who was prospecting for gold, going to Mount Shasta and finding these 7-foot tall bodies, the finding an underground city. But on the day that he was supposed to take all these experts to this city, he didn't show up. So his credibility is is hampered by that. But there are many people who study Mount Shasta to look for some type of alien life or civilizations that decided to move in Mount Shasta. Now, that part I find a little woo-woo-ish, that they would be in Mount Shasta and still be there today, to this day. And this is where some of the conspiracy theorists get in with the idea that they are hiding and working with the governments in order to maintain their secrecy. And from time to time, they give the government weapons, and they are truly the ones who are controlling all of the world's governments through Mount Shasta. So I'm just trying to read some of you guys' comments at the same time that I'm talking. Well, but the pictures of Atlantis is a ring, not a continent. Also, if the ocean rose by 400 feet, why is the Atlantic Pacific Ocean thousands of feet deep in the places where Atlantis and Lemuria used to be? Those places would only be 400 feet deep. All right. So I want you to think about it like this. What's the best way to put it? So if you were to go off the coast of most continents, after you go about 11 miles, or in some places, but not in other places, there's a continental shelf. And that shelf all of a sudden drops. Moving 400 feet doesn't mean that continental shelf, that all the water that you'll be able to walk out to that cliff, and then all it would appear to be is a cliff and then some water way down below it. Other areas out in the ocean, other areas near there wouldn't be that drop, that thousands of feet drop. You got to remember, places like Hawaii is just the top of a mountain. That underneath the Hawaiian Islands, all these mountains, what we can see is just the top. But if you recede the waters by 400 feet, a lot more of the mountain is now shown. And if you've been in some places where there's mountains, like in Peru, there's mountains, and then there's like lakes up in those mountains, and then there's valleys, and then there's other mountains. So all of Atlantis, all of Lemuria, all of Mu wouldn't be completely exposed with 400 feet of receding water, but a large portions of those land masses would. Like the Indonesia would all connect. If you remove 400 feet, the Indonesia would all connect, but then off of Indonesia, you would have some water, some lakes, some massive lakes or seas, and then other land masses on the other side of those seas. So they can all still be connected, but you will still have water that gets trapped in these large caverns. So all of it doesn't necessarily have to be exposed because the water moved 400 feet. I already explained that, Eric. I explained that a little bit earlier, Eric, when I was talking about how ice ages work, but thank you. But exactly. So when the water sits on the land and all that water returns, that's when it's going to explode through. So back to the story. Some of the more mythological or possible mythological story of where these religions come from. So Atlantis pretty much nuclears Lemuria. Now this also throws the ozone layer off. This also allows for more heat from the sun to be able to come in. This is one of the reasons why the world, other than just the mere destruction, because it is said that over 60 million people were killed in Lemuria, is the estimate that is given by some of these authors. And then with these type of nuclear bombardment, that it would create an opportunity for the solar flares and solar winds to creep into Earth's atmosphere and thereby melt all the ice. So one of the theories is that Atlantis went to war with Lemuria and Mu, and because they went to war and they were using hellified nuclear weapons, it pretty much created a catastrophe on the planet that allowed for all the polar ice, all that ice caps that was covering the majority of North America, for all of that to melt within 6 days. And if you look at some of the Anunnaki stories, it talks about the fact that Enlil knew that this flood was coming. Now, some of the stories said that the planet Nibiru was passing too close to the Earth, and that created a gap so that solar winds could come in and melt the ice caps. There are other Sumerian, Akkadian stories that merely says that Babylonian story that says that the war between Marduk and the nuclear war between Marduk and Enlil created a situation where it allowed for the solar winds to be able to enter Earth's atmosphere and melt all the ice that was on top of the lands. And then with all that ice melting, it created the massive floods that flooded out Lemuria, Atlantis, Sunderland, and Lemuria. So from those stories, you get your flood stories in your Bibles, the flood stories from the flood stories from the Akkadians, the Sumerian flood stories, the Enuma Elish, and all these other stories. Those are the ones that create, those stories are the ones that created the God stories. The war in heaven is really just a battle, a fight between the nation states of Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, and Sunderland. The flood stories of Noah, Gilgamesh, or Atrahasis, and Utnapishtim are merely flood stories based on the war that was fought between Atlantis, Mu, and Lemuria. Now, the reason why scientists, mainstream science, don't agree with those types of stories is simply because the authors of the main reason first is that the authors of those stories have been discredited for other false claims that they have made. But what cannot be denied is that there is a possibility that these cities existed, that these continents existed, because, why is that blue? Is that blue to y'all? Okay. Existed because we have the Yanaguni monument. because we have the step pyramid at Nan Madal, because there are the other known basalt civilizations that were more advanced than anybody else in that time frame of the world, that has been mapped out to be about 20,000, anywhere from 12 to 20,000 years old, at Gung Padang, which is the city, the mountain of enlightenment. And when we go off the coast of Cuba, we find these ancient cities that have existed that are not dated yet. And this is off the coast of Cuba. So with all of that information being plentiful for us, and with other people like the trauma people telling of the city of Darka, and that how that city was advanced and how that city was flooded, there were some level of civilization that was more advanced than Göbekli Tepe, more advanced than Turan Tepe, more advanced than the Sumerians and Akkadians at the time frame of around 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 BCE. That there was a restart of the planet because of either a natural extinction level event that occurred on the planet, or a man-made or whatever humanoid-made extinction level event that occurred on the planet. So what do you guys think? Do you think that these continents existed? Or do you think that these continents did not exist? Do you think that there were civilizations that were more advanced than what we know of the hunter-gatherers compared to how we are today? Because I don't think we go in this linear growth pattern. Whatever these types of humanoid beings were, whether they were Homo sapiens or whatever they were, they had been on the planet, according to the Sumerian story, they had been on the planet for 200,000 years. And this ice age and this event destroyed their civilizations, and there was a restart. If you can imagine, if a nuclear war started, there would be a restart of human civilization on Earth right now. And there will be ancient stories of that pertaining to America and so on and so forth. Because undoubtedly, civilizations would forget about who we are today. So like if that happened today, 5,000 years from now, civilization had to do a restart. The stories of us having airplanes and rockets and all these super weapons and medical technologies would become things of myth. So society, I think the world is a cycle. The civilization is a cycle. And we completely just keep going over and over the same cycles over and over again. Some lasting longer than others. All right, and it's been proven that man's been on the planet for, and actually I would up that number to 200,000 years. So of course we would go through that, and definitely there may have been different, the atmosphere would have been different. So we may not look exactly the same, have the exact same DNA, that over those thousands, tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, there would have been different adaptations to the earth. Right? We're stuck in a time loop and just keep repeating. I mean, Madame Blavatsky talked about, and I know she picked this from, I don't know which Native American tribe she picked it from. It's not off the top of my head, but she talked about how we are like the fifth version of man, or we're headed to the fifth version of man. It's something like that she was saying. I've read some of her work, not all of her work. I think civilization existed, and the Atlantis Lemurian makes sense now on the scale of them possessing nuclear capabilities. If it did, it was near extinction, just like a meteorite caused by other cataclysmic events. Oh, so that's, yes. The Hopi is the one who have that version that we're on the fifth. I was thinking it was the Hopi, but I didn't want to say that one exactly because I wasn't 100% sure. But yes, everything keeps repeating. I think my neighbor is done with his blowers. Let me open this window. Yeah, gotta let the smoke out. Now, if they did destroy themselves because of nuclear, some type, and I'm not saying it's exactly nuclear, it could have been fission. It could have been any other type. If they were at an advanced level, according to the stories, if they were at an advanced level where they had the capability of harnessing energy from the earth, truly harnessing energy from the earth and using it and weaponizing it, then it is plausible that nuclear energy or nuclear, Tim says, some kind of plasma-based weaponry would have been at their disposal. Nuclear is the closest thing we have to what that possibly could have been. And based on the Anunnaki story of the seven winds, that when Enlil lobbed some missiles at Marduk, city of Sodom and Gomorrah, supposedly a radioactive wind traveled southeast, and that radioactive wind destroyed 7 other cities. Now, archaeologists have found some of those cities, and those cities don't have a natural desertion look. Those cities have an almost Pompeii-like situation. Whereas in Pompeii, of course, you have these shells of where human bodies were and people were, but you can see how people were living their daily life. Those cities look like people were living their daily life, and then some type of something came in and destroyed them. And many stories talk about how this cloud or wind came in and killed those people. That sounds a lot like a radioactive cloud that moves with the flow of the natural patterns of the wind after a nuclear bombardment of Sodom and Gomorrah. So you would have that. So if you dropped a nuclear bomb on, what would be it? On like Birmingham, Alabama, just because the way the Gulf Stream moves, the radioactive wind would hit somewhere between Atlanta, Chattanooga, and flow on up to Charlotte, and then outward towards Winston-Salem, and then out to the coastline of North Carolina, Virginia, and then out into the ocean because of the way the Gulf Stream works. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Israel, but that Mediterranean wind comes from the west and blows into Israel, but when it hits the mountains, it kind of cuts south towards Mesopotamia, which is where these 7 cities were. So it would make sense that if you had a radioactive cloud that hit Sodom and Gomorrah in Israel, it would go through into Mesopotamia. Now, I don't think we're stuck in a loop where we repeat only because time itself is non-repetitive. Time itself is non-repetitive, but nature does seem to repeat itself to a certain degree. And human civilization seems to repeat itself. Like we don't learn from history as much as we should. I think that, the earth goes through cycles. It goes through cycles of ice ages. It goes through cycles of the opposite of what's the opposite of an ice age? I don't want to just call it a heat wave, but it goes through the opposite of that, where it heats up, cools off, heats up, cools off. Right? During those processes, there are going to be changes on the earth, and we are just merely trying to change the effects of that, trying to survive it. And meteorites, it's not a question of if we're going to ever be hit by another extinction level event meteorite. There's really a question of when. It's going to happen at some time frame. We don't know when and where, but we do know why. And that's because it's all kind of, even though people say the universe is created in perfection, no, the universe is chaotic as hell. There could be the next time Halley-Bot comet comes through our atmosphere, comes through our solar system, that some bitch could hit Earth. I'm sure that there's a time frame where all the planets around Earth, at some point, some planetary collision is going to happen. I'll hold that for Monday. Let me write it down though, because if I don't write it down, I ain't gonna remember shit. I did a video about that a while back. Okay. Global warming. That's a good. Global warming is the opposite of the of the ice age. What's a loosh? As humans as a loosh? According to the Sumerian story, humans are used as slaves. Humans were used as slaves. Now, the only parts of some of these stories I don't agree with, like the Hawaiians and a lot of the South Pacific people say that that these beings who inhabited Atlantis, Lemuria, were from the Pleiades. I don't agree with that at all. I think they were just they were humanoid beings that lived on the planet before us, or maybe they were just us, just a different version of us. Here, tropical period. I like that term too. I can go with either one. But we do seem to repeat. Let's say the Anunnaki story is correct, and the people who wrote that, the Chan Thomas and people of that nature, who wrote and Madame Blavatsky, who wrote about the war between Atlantis and Lemuria, we can see similarities in our cultures today. America, Russia, World War I, World War II. We see ourselves doing the same thing, fighting over resources, having nationhood, and those nationhoods trying to kill one another over resources to see who can be dominant, who wants to control the planet, thinking that, and each one thinking they are the hero. They are doing the right thing. Try to convince an American that America was doing the wrong thing during the Cold War is the same as being in Russia and trying to convince a Russian that a Soviet rather, that the Soviet Union was doing the wrong thing. The people who lived in the Soviet, most of them thought they were doing the right thing, that they were on the right side of history. So does America. And the only people who are on the right side of history, in truth, 99% of the time are the ones who win. So America seems to be on the right side of history during the Cold War because we won. Had we lost, we'd been on the wrong side. Had Europe lost World War I or II, they would be considered being on the wrong side of history. So, and look at how we do resources. Like water, why do I get a water bill every month? You should not have to pay for water. You shouldn't. You shouldn't have to pay for water. So I agree with you, Patel. Everything should be free. We should not have to pay for water. Some of the basic things of life we shouldn't be paying for. But we are repeating the same thing that those people talked about in those stories. So I can honestly see the world. I don't believe in MAD, mutually assured destruction. Somebody is going to be stupid enough one day to push a damn button. And it will, if one person pushes a button, the rest of the world will follow. And, you know, Patel, I had an opportunity to invest in an oxygen bar back in the day when oxygen bars were very popular. I couldn't do it simply because I was like, I'm not charging people for air. Just my own personal morals wouldn't let me charge people for air. Coach, have you heard the theory that Egyptian empire was started by refugees from Atlantis? This is why some of the older artifacts and structures are better quality than the newer ones. Yes, I've heard the theories. Now, many people place that theory with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth by Thoth the Atlantean, but I place it a little bit differently. Like I said, I don't trust Doriel. But when I look at the Egyptian society, I believe that Egypt, modern, where we see Egypt today, that was merely a colony of Atlantis. Just in the same way that when I was in the Marine Corps, we had bases in Germany and bases all over the world. I see Egypt as such. It was a colony of Atlantis. And because the Giza pyramids are older than what we would call the civilization of Egypt, the Sphinx is definitely older. So to me, Atlantis used that as a colony, and when their home continent was flooded out and destroyed, that they went there. Just as these people are claiming that the Lemurians went to Mount Shasta, the remnants of Atlantis went to Egypt to restart civilization. But of course, over the years with that type of worldwide destruction, technology takes a huge regression. You are right. The only losers that got to write their own history were the Confederacy, which is a funny thing. And that's a whole nother level of that political situation allowed for that to happen. Most of the time, you don't get that. But you know what? I can't say that because when I went to Russia and I got one of their history books I looked at what was in their history books from the 90s. They didn't write themselves as the loser. They write themselves as if they won and then pivoted. It's kind of like we lost, but we pivoted a little bit. Kind of like if Japan claims, the Japanese history will say, yeah, we lost the war, but we pivoted to an economic war, and then we won the economic war against America, right? So when you look at the Japanese history books, they kind of write themselves as the victors as well. We're talking about Tartaria on Monday. Monday will be Tartaria. But so this I've researched this information a long time ago because I used to be one that would have said if you look at some of my videos 10 years ago, I was all down for the Anunnaki story. But then as I started researching the Anunnaki story, I was like, Alien, no, not so much aliens. Previous Earth and civilization, because of what we have found underwater. Because of what we found underwater. And if we were to dig deeper, well, not dig deeper, but swim deeper, I think we will find a hell of a lot more information of civilizations that existed long before or during the last ice age. Yes, and you can't thank the United Daughters of the Confederacy for how the war was taught. And they are still very prevalent in doing so. And they main base here in Texas. So I do want to open up the discussion to any subject matter you guys want to talk about. That was my breakdown and thought processes on Mu, Lemuria, and all of that information. You know, take what you can take from it. But if you think about it, most of your biblical stories, your Vedic stories, your Upanishad stories, many of them, your Greek stories, stem from this event, this time frame of when there obviously were some civilizations that were in existence prior to the Younger Dryas flood, during those ice age and beyond, during the last ice age and beyond. And those stories got retold as gods, as flood stories of Noah or Manu or Atrahasis or Utnapishtim. All of them got retold as new stories for a new burgeoning society of man. I have not heard that before. That it might be near the Horn of Africa instead of that it was a mistranslation of Plato's writings. See, I can see it going either way. There's also people who are saying that it was near Sardinia, the island of Sardinia, which sits off the coast of Italy. So Atlantis is going to be that hard one for people to really lock down. Lemuria, Mu, Sunderland, Maritanus, those are easier because there's actual evidence of those possibly existing. And for those of you guys who weren't here on the beginning of this, if you were to look at the very first comments that were posted on these videos, there's a link for the webinar that we will be doing. I'll be conducting on May 4th concerning the flood stories and how these flood stories came about. What we discussed in this information will be a small portion of where the flood stories came from, the science behind it, and why the Noah's version of the flood story is an impossibility, and that these flood stories scientifically and mythologically came from previous civilizations. And all those things will be broken down into greater detail. There's a link to the Eventbrite where you can get your tickets for that. And it will be it's a limited number of tickets that I'm allowing. The Bantu people certainly were dark-skinned people. I know I know you were having a conversation with somebody else, but yes, that Mandela effect happens all the time. I think Betty White died for 10 years in a row before she actually passed away. And I don't even know if she really did or not. I'm just saying she really passed away. Is Betty White alive? I think she did. I just have to know that now. Betty White. Yep, she died in 2021. But for 10 years, every year she was dead. I don't know why people ever thought Mandela died in prison. I mean, I watched the man get coronated as president. I saw his whole process through his presidency. I don't know why people thought he died in prison. It said that Atlantis may actually be in Africa because of where the placement of the Pillars of Hercules is to where the thoughts of Plato meant. It is. I thought with the one video I was watching was saying that that's why they thought it was in Sardinia because of the Pillars of Hercules. See, here's the thing about Atlantis for me, even with the Eye of Africa, and the Eye of Africa is one of the most compelling. Bimini and off the coast of Cuba are also equally as compelling. So there's got to be a lot more information before we can declare Atlantis. The Bantu people say they are the original inhabitants of the plane of existence. If I understand you correctly, every group of people, every tribe claimed that they were the original people. That is why any story where people are claiming that they were the original people, I find it to be absurd because that's what everybody claims. If you go and talk to Aboriginals, they claim they were the first people on the planet. Until the Chinese dude realized that Chinese people come from East Africa, hell, they thought they were the original people on the planet. The Hopi thought they were the original people on the planet. Everybody always thinks they're the original people on the planet. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I really don't give a shit as to who were the original people on the planet. I really don't care. I mean, it's nice to know, okay, we're DNA wise, well, yeah, DNA wise, we know that the only people group that can produce every color of the spectrum in as far as melanin is concerned are Black people out of Africa. So you could utilize that. But at the end of the day, to me, it don't matter. It doesn't matter. And Lucy is not even an ancient hominid in the sense of a Homo sapien, or that would become Homo erectus to Homo sapien. Lucy is an ancient chimpanzee. Lucy is not where we derive from. Dr. Leakey just found an ancient chimpanzee, and that's it. He found what chimpanzees were before they evolved into modern day chimpanzees. And I think that's confused a lot of people on thinking that evolution says that man came from monkeys. We don't come from monkeys. What about the X flares causing the recent earthquakes? I have no idea about that. I don't even know what X flares are. I don't think that we are technologically advanced enough to actually cause earthquakes. We are not close to being able to control the earth and the weather like that. Now, do I think that if you bombard the tectonic plate in a certain point, that it would create an earthquake? Possibly. But what do you bombard it with? I mean, you're talking about earthquakes are created by tectonic plates rubbing against each other, or fault lines rubbing against each other. I don't think we have enough power to force that to happen. I'm still a little heart. I'm still. Don't get me wrong. I do understand that we are working on trying to control the weather. We are working on trying to cause earthquakes and things like that. Daniel, I haven't spent much time on that science to see what it's actually talking about. And oftentimes, probably one of the main reason why I haven't spent that much time wondering about that or concerned about that, because it stems from a racist supremacy type of viewpoint. I don't give two shits if black people were the first people, or black people are different from white people as far as our genetics or even our evolution. All I look at is right now, a sentient white person is just as equal as a sentient black person, just as equal as a sentient Asian person and any other person. So to say that one is better than the other just smacks of a lower vibration for me. No insult towards you, but my focus can never be there because of the implied supremacy involved. So X flares or magnetic flares or flares from the sun. That would be interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. Isaac stupid. If only you had exactly. So they're doing some mental manipulation. Now, what's funny, Isaac, and I know you're being sarcastic and satire if people aren't getting that, is that there are some Buddhist and Indus monks that believe that once you reach the highest level, that you will have the ability to control the weather. But these monks are so high in their piety that they would never utilize that for evil, to hurt people. Now, I'm not fully on board with that, but I think it's interesting. Yes, Prime, I'm done with my. Oh, I forgot to put the thing out there. I'm done with my presentation. So there's the link if anybody wanted to come on. Primer said he had something to say that I don't remember. We talked about it. Huh, that's interesting. The Facebook version didn't post. Let's try it again. It's gonna post again on. Oh, it did post on Facebook. Why is it saying it didn't post? Mm-hmm. Oh, let me see. I missed some comments. All right. Yeah, it's interesting. They claim they have a power, but then they but can't prove it because they can't use it for evil. There's a way to do it without using it for evil. You can just, be in the desert and make it rain or some shit. You're backstage. Why is it not showing me that? Oh, I didn't realize that it does that. Hold on, we're bringing Primer up.
Hey, Coach, how you doing?
How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. You can't remember our discussion, man. What you doing? Come on.
What?
You can't remember our discussion. I brought, had my tablet up, everything. It was concerning. Okay, let me see if I can jog your memory. Just and the audience has been waiting to hear me. You know,
Yeah,
I've been on your channel more than a year now. I mean, you know that. I
I
respond
know.
I respond to your videos. We've been back and forth. So
Yeah, I know that part. That part I know.
I always be up in the comments, right? So the first time when you started to do you have had the live guest, I came on, right? And we had
Okay.
like a hour discussion. In fact, I had the video on my channel. I copied it, and I'm just telling you because I did ask you. I told you that I was going to put it up, so I didn't
That's
edit anything. I just put it as it was. That's what I normally do. So you remember? Let me jog your memory. You were
yeah, you got
doing
done.
the biblical timeline,
Okay.
right? And so you said, hey, based on the timeline, that none of the dates didn't correlate, but it was from a certain point. I came up and I showed you, I said, hey, based on the solar eclipses, and I told you that since I'm using scientific evidence to pinpoint events, biblical events, also biblical and non-biblical events, to establish the dates and the time, that we can not only establish dates and times, empires, kings, and also the timeline of the scripture, as well as we can also establish the timeline for the appearance of the Messiah. You didn't
Okay.
remember that conversation?
Vaguely.
Yeah, I guess you do too much every day. Or maybe them the cigars. I told you you gotta quit or slow down,
It
man.
ain't the cigars, my guy. It ain't the cigars. You gotta. My mind
Uh-huh.
is always working on so many different levels, and
Right.
not just this, but like I do a relationship channel. I talk about finances. So I'm always contemplating so many things, and then I spend a lot of my time just working on myself. So
Okay, that's good. That's good. Plus, you gotta spend time with the missus. Tell her I said hello.
that, that's right.
God bless her. I'm still gonna be kind. So let me just do a quick rundown, right?
All
Based on
right.
our based on the we had on that discussion that we had, we did do a couple of things, right? I did provide to you my source data, which is from NASA. So it's purely scientific, nothing of which I am presenting. So it's scientific. So and I'm guessing that last time we spoke, you did accept the fact that uh you're okay with using the NASA data as a reference point and a scientific, unrefutable data within your paradigm.
No. Okay. So what did the NASA data say that
Okay, cool.
proves the Bible?
Right. So first of all, uh, based on the fact when you were doing the presentation on the timeline, so it was pretty coincidental that you had guests up and I came up. So this is what I told you. I said that there are a couple solar eclipses that NASA has recorded from, I think it was last year when it had one, straight back until they can record them because the eclipses happen like clockwork. So there's no way that anyone can say, well, that's just their scientific method of recording solar eclipses. If we have solar eclipses on particular dates happening um, at pinpointed times during Earth's history, then we can now reference, uh, uh, let's say, truthfully, the records, if the Bible's record lines up with some scientific data of dates that we can now pinpoint. So one of them that I had here was in the Assyrian eponym solar eclipse record, which is the Berg Sukle eclipse. It dates to the 10th year of Ashurdan the third, June 15th, 763. So in the Assyrian eponym records, there is a solar eclipse that was recorded there, right?
Okay.
Uh, right. So based on the fact that there are a couple, uh, what I would call societies, or maybe I should call them, what's the word I want to use? Nations. So let's say, for instance, the Assyrians, they recorded their history. You also have the Chinese and various other persons. But I'm just saying the eponym record, it's widely read. And if you go, I think it's the 18th record version, there is a solar eclipse there, and it's dated as June 15, 763, because of the mere fact in NASA, by their records, if you go to the NASA records at the solar eclipse, you can actually get this date straight down to the minute. So this record that the Assyrians recorded, right, which was in the 10th year of Ashadan the third, June 15, 763, is solid bulletproof.
Proof of
Okay.
what?
Bulletproof of the date in terms of the event happening, the solar eclipse happening,
Okay.
meaning that, right? So, meaning that if we can now pinpoint that the 10th year of Asherdan, right, is 763, June 15th, 763, now we have a reference date that we have bulletproof, a starting point where we can now calculate dates prior and dates after. We good?
Okay.
Okay, cool. Now, and also we can now, based on even their records, we can now follow the genealogical kings and successors from those kingdoms. So, like if you had, so let's say, for instance, that one was in 763. If we follow historically, we would have 745, Tiglath-Pileser the third, right? And if we now start to correlate the successive kings, Tiglath-Pileser, Shalmaneser the fifth, right? Those names coming down. Now we can use Bible references based on those kings and the time frame from when those eponym record and that solar eclipse comes down, that we can now begin to plug in dates. We okay so far?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I got a bunch of I have it on a timeline list. The last time you did allow me to put it on the screen. So you know I'm cool. I'm not gonna do anything weird. So let me just give me one sec.
What do you mean I
So
didn't allow you to put it on the screen? You can put it on the
no, I
screen
said
now.
you allowed me, so I'm just doing it like
Okay.
again. So I'm telling you before I actually did it.
Let me
It
see if
might
I
be a
can.
little bit small, but
I'm trying to see if one of these screens will let it be bigger.
yeah, I think you gotta edit it. If you never edit it, it mightn't work. But I mean, it's okay. I can always, I could always share it with you. It's no big. So, so based on my timeline in terms of using the solar eclipses, and we got a couple solar eclipses. Yeah, there we go. We got a couple solar eclipses that we can use, right? In terms of it. So first one actually is the Ugaritic solar eclipse. That's in 1075, right? That happened on May 3rd, 1075. There were other solar eclipses in Mesopotamia as well, but the ones that I have the asterisks, those are the bulletproof ones that we have particular references to. Now, there's one I want to come down to, um, not the Jerusalem temple. There's another one that I just want to pull up here. Give me a sec. Good. That's the Assyrian one. Uh, Also, Shalmaneser, 12 years. That 6th year of that reigned 31 years. Jehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar, 4th year of Jehoiakim's reign. Jehoiakim made king 3 months. Zedekiah, Jerusalem, fall of Babylon conquered. Decree third year of King Cyrus, first year of Darius, Xerxes. Xerxes, which is 465, right? Xerxes' death is actually has, which is happened in 465. It has cuneiform records of his death between two solar eclipses in the year 465, which is between June 5th and November 30th. So NASA has this record of two solar eclipses. Now, in his cuneiform records, right, for Xerxes' death, they have the records that there were two solar eclipses that happened within that region, and actually NASA records them June 5th and November the 30th. So this
Okay.
would be 465. So we got
So
765. Sorry,
how is this
seven.
proved in the Bible though?
Right. So the time frame, right, in terms of the successions of kings, the events that would now take place, right, proves that the Bible's chronology, right, from these reference dates and times, right? Sorry, let me just, yeah, from the Bible's reference dates and times now correlate with the scientific data that anyone can go up and now get, and you can use that as reference. So let's
Well,
take, yeah, go
no,
ahead.
no, 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 no.
Go
So
ahead.
what I have always maintained
Hmm.
is from the 8th century, which would be your 700 BCE time frame,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
from the 8th century on,
Hmm.
that the Bible recording who the kings were, the king of Israel, the king of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, Persians, all that,
Hmm.
that information is historical. I will grant you that those kings existed, those rulers existed during those time frames.
Hmm.
What I don't grant
Hmm.
is prior to that time frame,
Hmm.
there is no proof of Jonah. I mean, not Jonah. Well, hell, Jonah. There's no proof of Jonah. There's no, but I meant to say Joshua. There's no proof of Joshua. There's no
Hmm.
proof of Moses and Noah and Abraham and all of those people, and that the timelines can fluctuate based on what part of the Bible you accept and read from.
Hmm.
Now, even though it may identify that, for instance, in that 700 BCE time frame, that Hezekiah was the king of northern Israel,
Hmm.
what it doesn't validate is an angel came and killed 180,000 of their troops.
Hmm.
So just because you can say yes, Sennacherib was king at this time frame during Hezekiah, sure,
Right. But
but
I
that
mean,
doesn't
coach,
mean an angel came to
I'm
kill 180,000 people.
right. So coach, what I'm saying is this. I I hear your counter argument, but what I'm saying is that I'm not on the premise of trying to prove, let's just say, like the example that you used there, there's no way that we can have scientific information unless there's some archaeological find that would expose that, and that hasn't been there. So some of these open-ended ones, I'm not gonna say, hey, it's what I'm saying is this, right? In terms of the truthfulness of the records of the Bible as it's stated, before we had these external technological instruments where we can now backdate time and events and correlate them, much of everyone said, "Hey, the Bible is pretty much just a collection of Jewish fables and history or whatever as the case may be." But what I'm saying is much of the um, pertinent history in the scriptures starts from that particular time. A lot of the kings, a lot of the events that transform history as we know it today started from that 8th century BC period, come straight down even to
I
now.
can't I can't go with you on that logic right there.
Okay. Hmm.
Because if you take away the Genesis stories, the
Hmm.
flood story, if you take away the Exodus story and the Joshua story,
Hmm.
then the Old Testament, the Torah, has no legs. And so then the New Testament will have no legs.
Hmm.
They cannot stand without Genesis happening. They cannot stand without Exodus happening. Without
Hmm.
Exodus, you have no validation for Joshua then divvying up the land and that being the promised land. Without Abraham, that cannot be the promised land if it's just if it can't stand.
What I'm saying is this, right? What you may be looking for is specific information in terms, I would say specific evidence that will detail these particular events or characters. And what I'm looking at is, okay, what what do we have present day now? So let's just say if I have to use information to the skeptic community and say, okay, I got this junk of information from the scriptures that basically it is saying that all of these characters and these events that happen were actually true because we can now pinpoint and date externally from Bible in other societies So like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, and we can now correlate if what the scriptures, what the Bible records is saying is true, and not only if it's true, if it's chronological. Because
But
part of the
what aspects? Like Isaac just you see what Isaac wrote?
argument. Let me just read what it says. An example of history the Bible got wrong is when it says Joshua knocked down the walls of Jericho. Coach, we did this one already, but I'll entertain it. No problem. The walls were knocked down hundreds of years before Joshua would have been there. Also, not historical that the sun stood still. Well, all right. Let me just run with it. Sky almost a whole day to right. Cool, no problem. Right. So, coach, we we've been on this discussion with that one with the Joshua Wall, and if you remember clearly, and I did, I said that you have two opinions on it. Um, one lady quoted one date. I think she came after. Some of the researchers before quoted another date, and there has been a counter argument between which camp to believe in terms of what it is. But my point is that hey, the wall was there.
No, there is no opinions nor counter arguments. It is a
Coach,
fact that by the 1500 BCE that that the walls of Jericho were down, and it is a fact that they weren't rebuilt until 1000 BCE. Now Joshua, depending upon which timeline you use, Joshua was either 1200 BCE or 1300 BCE. So there would have been no walls for Joshua to knock down. And also during that time frame, the city of Ai was abandoned already before Joshua and did not become re-inhabited until around 600 or 500 BCE.
Right. So I'm saying, coach, I can accept the counter arguments, but here's what I'm saying, right? First of all, I have a little joke that I always tell people. If you want to know the history about any place, town, city, nation, country, look at the names of the places. Now, here's my point. There's been disagreement all across, whether it be the atheist camp archaeologists and the biblical archaeologists, and we got different camps. Nope, I'm not saying those who get funded may speak louder than those not, but I'm not here to discuss that. But what I'm saying is this: did the Bible get the names correct? Did they get the places and the locales correct? So that's the first thing that if I'm to use the Bible as some type of historical factor, while we can argue whether it was 100 or 500 years different, or even 1,000 years, I'm saying right that does it get the names and places and figures correct? Do we have the characters in the Assyrian records that correlate with?
That's a weak argument.
No,
Um,
how it is?
Let me tell you why that's a weak argument.
Okay, go
Because
ahead.
what's his name? Homer, in his Iliad and Odyssey, he got Troy, he got the city of Troy correct, right?
Mhm.
We can agree on. Can we agree on that? Because we found the city of Troy.
Mhm.
So he got the city of Troy correct. Based on your argument, then, since he got the city of Troy correct, then that means Achilles is a real person and is a demigod. So you accept that Achilles is a demigod?
No, you used this example the last time. When I'm
Yeah,
you
because
use that you use almost the same example, and I think the last time you used some Mayan records and you made
it's
the
a great example because if
same
you
same counter argument. But I
just
responded. Go ahead, go ahead.
just because at the time frame that the story of Joshua was being written, and Joshua may have been some kind of warlord or some conqueror in ancient Canaan,
Mhm,
but that doesn't mean. And Jericho was an ancient city that they knew the walls had been destroyed at some point. So
mhm,
just because they write a narrative that Joshua was the one to knock those walls down by traveling around it 7 times,
mhm,
that part is not true simply because they named the right city.
mhm.
Because Ai was uninhabited and they wrote a story that Joshua burned the city and killed all the men, women, and children and animals, it doesn't mean that Joshua was the one who did it. Now, archaeology,
Mhm.
not biblical archaeologists, because when biblical archaeologists go and look at a place, they are looking at it already deciding that the Bible is right. True archaeology goes and wherever they land is where they land.
No,
And
but
so
we got the same.
there's no disagreement between pure archaeology. The only disagreement comes from apologist archaeology.
No, but coach, let's be fair. If you check some of the endowment for some of these research institutes, you know they got a bias and they got funding where it comes from. It's like
How can
it's
you,
like it's
how
like
can you,
it,
wait,
let,
wait,
let me put
wait,
it this way.
how can
It's
you
like
say that,
wait,
but
wait, wait.
then you want to give biblical archaeologists a pass?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's be fair. So that's all I'm saying is remember I said you got the two camps, and one will say yeah, and I'm just being I'm going center line, so I'm not being biased for my guys against yours. I'm just saying, hey, let's acknowledge that on both camps, you got one who has the funding a lot more than the other, because most of the time the Christian archaeology, they ain't got the big budget. I mean, they go, they do stuff, they do their own research, and then they do whatever. While on the other hand, the atheist camp, I could turn it off. I mean, that's yeah. The atheist camp, they got their endowments, they got their funding. It's like this. It's like for years we know that we may, and let me just, I don't want to get in challenge, but the Surgeon General has a quote on a particular product, right? For years. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. So for years he just makes that statement, but it's the same people for years who funding research and say no, it's okay, we cool, it's good, right?
But here's the difference though. Here's the differentiator.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't call them atheists because many archaeologists are religious. Okay, many archaeologists believe they're either they're Muslims or they're Christians.
Cultural.
Most archaeologists aren't atheists.
No, they cultural.
Well, let me rephrase that. Most are, but there are still archaeologists out there who are not. And so the difference is that when an archaeologist published that Jericho's walls were down by 1500 BCE and weren't rebuilt to 1000 BCE,
right,
is that then their discovery is not fully accepted initially. It then goes through peer review. And peer review is done by many different archaeologists with different people backing them, because I understand if someone is backing you, people have a tendency to lean in that direction. Yes. But when your information is being reviewed by those who are set up financially to disagree with you,
mm-hmm,
then
you're not gonna go against the same people who funded your university as well, right? Come on.
Let's say a Yale person discovered 1500 BCE is when the walls were down,
right,
and they're funded by Yale, and let's say Yale was a Christian school, and then Harvard goes in and they look at it, and let's say Harvard is funded by atheists. They're atheistic. At the end of the day, they both came to the same conclusion, that it was down by 1500. There's no archaeologist who is not an apologist that says that those walls were down or still up at the time frame of Joshua. Okay. The only ones who try to say that are the apologists.
So as I say, 6 one way, half a dozen the next. I don't want us to zero in on that, but I'm just zeroing in terms of the fact that you could remember all of this.
I remember it now.
Not all right, scientific data, because you keep saying.
But I disagree with it then, and because it doesn't validate the Bible is true.
No, yes, it does. It validates chronologically the events, right? The kings. So let me just put it this way.
Be careful with the word events. Be specific. It validates that certain kings were in power at certain times, and the Bible is in agreement with those kings being in power at that time.
Right.
That part it validates. Events such as an angel killing 180,000 people doesn't validate that at all. Jonah being swallowed by a whale doesn't say
whale. It doesn't say whale.
It
doesn't say whale.
Huh?
I say it doesn't say whale, but go ahead.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm just knocking you. But also,
But
we,
it
we
doesn't
had.
valid. Here's the most important part.
Mm-hmm,
There is even if you could prove that Jonah existed
mm-hmm,
and somehow survived in the belly of a fish for 3 days,
mm-hmm,
there is no evidence that Jonah went to Nineveh, told the king of Nineveh what was going to come down based on the God Yahweh,
mm-hmm,
and then the people of Nineveh put
mm-hmm.
on sackcloths and repented and all that stuff, and then Jonah went and set up under a tree. There
Right.
is zero information.
But can we confirm that the city of Nineveh existed?
We know the city of Nineveh existed.
Okay, good. Could we confirm how big it was in terms of the reference? So if it is, I'm saying
Yeah,
if I'm going to test
Nineveh
somebody's
has been mostly excavated. So the size of Nineveh, a lot of the construction, there's thousands, tens of
right
thousands
up
of
to today, it's
tablets that
still
were
there.
found.
Up to today, it's still there. You can pass and see the wreckage, right? And we
Yeah,
also
I've been
right,
there. Yeah,
right, and we have Xenophon who records right in his records of him passing through there when they were fleeing. I can't remember if it's the Arabians or the Muslims, and then which whenever they were fleeing, right? So my point is this, right? Uh, based on I'm saying some of the nitty gritty details is what the skeptics are always wanting the evidence for the supernatural stuff. And I'm saying
yeah.
just from a pure, and I'm saying let's put the supernatural stuff aside. And I'm saying I'm looking at it from just pure information. If I'm testing the information, the basic stuff, let's just say I read a book and I might believe everything that the book says, but there are some things that I myself can test. I can research and see if what this person is saying based on the clues and information that's there, if it's truthful or not. I mean, that's just being logical and using reasoning and deduction. And I'm saying that the Bible stands truth for truth and has confirmed what's in it to be so.
No, because you swing with a broad sword, my guy. You
No,
are
I'm saying, I go ahead. Go ahead.
because if I said yes, you are right to that, then what? And based on your broad swing, then I'm saying that all the events of the Bible are true then because they talked about Nineveh and the scale of Nineveh and the king of Nineveh,
Right.
right? The Assyrian king. That's a broad stroke to say that then that means everything else in the Bible is true. When yes, the supernatural things are the things that we target mostly because you have to be able to prove those things if you want me to accept them. And then a lot of the information prior to the 8th century BCE is fictitious and don't match up with history.
No, I can't say I wouldn't agree with you when it says it's fictitious. I am just gonna say I'm gonna wait, and we have been to this stage. Let's just say 100 years ago. We live in an era now where information is far superior than 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So let's say we can totally agree on that. Much of in terms of people can now travel, go investigate at a click of a button. You got a lot of resources that you can now investigate on your own and see. And I'm saying now that I'm able to use your same skeptic scientific approach, I'm saying I'm going to use the methods that you guys are comfortable with to now say, okay, based on what we've been telling you, let's just look at the evidence, right? And I'm saying let's put the supernatural stuff aside, but
Okay.
let's just look at whether or not these cities ever existed, the kings, the rulers, the wars that happened, if these things were ever true. And I'm saying we can now go to the other ancient civilizations, right? And we can now correlate and we can see what they were saying were correct, what the Bible is saying is correct. So the Assyrians, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Persians, we got records now. So even the one the what was the name, the Philae inscriptions, the what was the name of the folks, the Jewish folks that were in Egypt on the island that had a um
The ones who had the fort down there in the middle of the little island in the midst of the
in the Nile, yeah.
Nile.
What's the name of the place? You always quote them.
Ah,
Uh,
shit. I can't think of the name of it
you
right
you
now.
know what I'm talking about,
I
right?
know what you're talking about though.
Right. It just kind of slips my mind now, right? Oh man, how could I forget the name of these people? Anyhow, so my point being is this, right? We can now go to that excerpt, even back then, right? Because and last time we spoke, we did use Herodotus and Josephus and what was the other guy named before? And we did say, listen, even now we can correlate what they're saying, right? Not just them alone, but now we can use the records because the language has been more available to read the historical data from these other civilizations.
I'm talking about the elephantine. Sorry, I had
Elephantine, that's
you were
correct.
going to kill me if I didn't look it up.
Yeah. Elephantine record, right? So even that, right, actually confirms some of the Jewish rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem in terms of the priests and all of that kinds of stuff. And I'm saying there are references by other people, Josephus, Herodotus, that correlates all of these things. So I'm saying that while you can be skeptic on the supernatural stuff, which is what you guys always point out, when it comes down to the historical record, it's been tried, it's been weighed, and we have not been found wanting. In fact, it's been confirmed.
Okay, it's been confirmed that there were Israelites who was a garrison that under the Assyrians that was on that little base, and that they had questions to the temple in Jerusalem about their worship. But that's fine. We have that's the thing that people who believe in this book don't understand. We are fine with Israelites existing. Okay. We are fine with them being conquered by the Assyrians and them having a garrison at Elephantine. Perfectly fine with that. Perfectly fine with them sending messages to the temple in Jerusalem and that the temple of Jerusalem was there. No problem whatsoever. The problem comes with the belief in the God and all the miracles that this God is supposed to have done and that we're supposed to submit to this God. The problem is that we all come from Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Yeah, Noah's 16 grandsons.
Those are problematic.
No, it's not. The name's still there.
the name is there for who? The Holy Indians didn't know nothing about no damn Ham, Shem, and Japheth.
No, the names are still there. The names are the tribes and the people.
So
you know that, right? That the some of the Europeans descendants come through that. Even the names, the Germans.
They were already there before the Noah story ever happened. There are settlements in Europe that were there before 22, what is it? The Noah story happens in like 22, 25, somewhere around in there. 2500, 2200, somewhere around in there. There were already
European settlements. Yeah, but coach, we got to deal with, here's what I'm dealing with in terms of the, you just brought it up, so I don't want to go off on it, but what I'm saying is that in terms of the 16 Noah's 16 grandson descendants, and in terms of the population spread and how they settled, there were people who were alive before the flood. You understand me? So
they were still there after the flood.
Right,
but the Kemetic people were there after the flood, before Mizrahim ever went down there. Right, they were already there.
Right, but what my point is, I'm not disputing whether or not there were settlements before. I'm just saying that the tribe, that's not the tribal folks that repopulated some of those areas.
Here's my thing, my guy. You say they repopulated an area, but there is no break in the population. The people, the Kemetic,
can we confirm that?
We can confirm it with their own records, and we can see that the civilization never went through any devastation. There was never a devastation that occurred in Mizraim or Egypt or Kemet in and around the 2000 BCE. They never experienced any of it. As a matter of fact,
come on, you're now showing me pyramids below the sea. I know there are civilizations that are below the sea, out in the sea from Egypt. So how did they get there?
No, I didn't. There, if you would see, that's why you should have stayed on the video.
No. I know the pyramids you talked about was out in Cuba.
It never came from you. Yeah, the pyramids that was under the water in Cuba had nothing to do with Egypt.
No. What I'm saying is this, right? In terms of if we establish today and we say, hey, Egypt is this place, but if you go out in the sea, right, you will see that there are structures that are below that the sea level was once at a different level. I won't come to the point of what you were presenting tonight in terms of if there are people living under the sea. I'm not going with that. But what I'm just saying is that
What do you mean people live? They weren't living under the sea. They were living on land that from the sea regressing during the ice age. When the Younger Dryas flood happened, all that water rushed in and those civilizations were destroyed.
Right.
And
so
so the remnants that we are finding are their civilizations that were coastal. Like everybody, most of people in the world today live coastal. So if there was a 400 feet sea rise level, then all of New York gone. Florida, right. The whole state of Florida is gone. Savannah gone. You see what I'm saying?
So here's my
1,000 years from now, you would see the remnants of that still underwater. Right. So they weren't living underwater.
No, I'm not saying they were. I'm just saying we can't say that they were living. That's my point. But what I'm trying to denote is that today, if we look at Egypt, we just see the pyramids. But I'm saying if you go out in the sea, right, on the coast, under the seabed, under the water right now, out in the bay, off Alexandria, I can't remember exactly where it is. Forgive me. That there are structures that show that there was a living civilization living there. And I'm saying that was before. So my point being is this.
Yeah, that was before the Younger Dryas flood. But but that didn't destroy the inland people who were living in modern day Cairo. The people who were living down in Karnak, the people living in Luxor. Those people weren't affected by the Younger Dryas flood.
Right. But what I'm saying is this, right? When you said there's no break, right? The records doesn't show no break. I'm saying, hey, you got evidence to show that there was a break because you got civilization structures and settlements that are below the sea that it would have had a break. They would have had to know.
No, sir. Not a break. A catastrophe that happened on the coastal cities, yes. But a break in the Kemetic Empire, no.
No. What I'm pointing out. Right.
There was no break in their civilization. The pyramids in Gaza were never flooded.
Mm-hmm.
The down in Karnak never flooded. Just like China never flooded.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna.
America never flooded.
But you gotta be fair. Some of the history from those Egyptians are sketchy. We know they let's be.
They were never flooded.
No, Coach. We gotta. But wait. So when the geology don't match up with the history of the Egyptians themselves, what are we gonna do now? And we know that there's a problem there.
But the geology does. The Sphinx was never underwater.
No, I'm not disputing. I don't know when the Sphinx was thing. They can say it was how many thousand?
Long before Noah.
So they say. So they say. So here's my reasoning, right? My point is this. So here's my point, right?
So you think that after 2200 BCE, they built the pyramids and the Sphinx?
I'm saying that I still gotta make a judgment call on some of these geological stone, and I don't want to go into the carbon dating argument. We had that the last time, but I'm just saying it's questionable in terms of the dates, and we have relevant information today to know that hey, them atheist professors, them atheist researchers use them own dates.
I'm not no personal.
Nah, go ahead. No good.
Thing at you.
Take your swipe. Go ahead.
But you are looking at this like a apologist. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't fit your narrative, then you are unaccepting of the information because your narrative has to work. No. So the information no, that's how you're looking at it, because anything that says otherwise from your biblical narrative, all of a sudden it's atheist, it's skepticism, is we can't trust this, we can't trust that.
But that's your community, so I gotta come. I gotta be in your paradigm to kind of
No,
respond to
let
you.
me tell you what. Let me tell you my community. My community is, when it comes to research, my community is, I don't care where the information lands. I'm going to accept it wherever it lands.
Okay, fair,
If
fair
it
enough.
fits my narrative, fine. But if it doesn't, then I pivot and I adjust to whatever the new paradigm is.
But can we question? Can if the evidence and the conclusions that have been penned are questionable, even by them, even by their own peers, which one do we accept?
The one with the most valid information, the one that has the most facts and proof behind it. Now, the
Right.
most facts and proof behind it is that the Kemetic civilization didn't have a break from a worldwide flood in 2200 BCE. See, this is why you do need to be on my, you need to join that webinar,
You gonna
because
ban me?
I'm going to get deep into that. But yes,
Go ahead.
that is shameful, shameless promotion. Yes, it is. But
Were you selling, coach?
I shit. Look, if
You
I'm
know
gonna
I
do,
was bugging you. Go
I
ahead. Go
told
ahead.
y'all a year ago that I would start doing this like a job instead of a
Uh,
hobby. So you're
uh,
damn right.
go ahead.
Everything ain't gonna be free. But
You know, I always mess with you until you
I
when you
know that, and that's why you need to go buy one of the shirts, like you said. Chance over there and buy a shirt.
Go ahead, make your point. Make your
Matter of
point.
fact, the shirt that I want you to buy is the one that says "lying ass liar," because then you can call me the lying ass liar. You see what I'm saying?
No, it's gonna say Lion of the tribe of Judah.
Man, I would never make a shirt that say that. But anyway,
Go
um,
ahead.
and it's not just the Egyptians.
Uh,
The Minoans don't show a break. The Chinese, what we call modern day Chinese, there is no
mhm,
break in their civilizations.
mhm,
The Polynesians, there's no, and they should have a break. Shit, they living on little ass islands. They should have a break, but they don't have a break. The
mhm.
Australians, or the what do you call Australian? Aboriginals, they don't have a
Aborigines.
break. They don't
Mhm,
have a
mhm.
break.
Yeah, but
The
there's no way. No, but coach, let's be fair. None of these carbon dating methods, right? I don't want to go into it. I'll make my swipe. We can move on. I'm just saying that I'm gonna be a skeptic just as well as you guys when it comes to the supernatural stuff. And I'm gonna be a skeptic. And you gotta allow us to be a skeptic in our community of when the scientists say stuff and then come later on and gotta correct their own thing. Because as I told you, in terms of the Big Bang theory and the age of the universe, that's all these things are being now reviewed by because of the James Webb Telescope. And we had that conversation the last time, and I'm saying, hey, the same people who were telling us, no, this is fixed, now come to say, wait, we got some problems here. How how could how could some galaxies that were formed after be older than the ones that actually caused it? It don't make no sense, right?
how can galaxies formed afterwards be older than ones?
That caused it.
I've never heard that one before, so
Yes,
I can't
that's the
really
big
speak on it.
that's the big. So what they say, that's I'm
That
breaking it down layman's terms, right? Layman's terms, right? So you can have a galaxy, right, where you're measuring, right, the distance and the transformation of the light and all of this energy stuff on burst. I'm not a astrologer and nothing like that. That's a normal layman. But then you come now with your new instrument and your new instrument and say, hey, that one there is older than the actual one that caused it. That is weird. It's Axel.
that if that's true, that would be weird.
Mhm,
But the beauty of scientific discovery is
mhm.
that it's continuously tested to see if the current paradigm fits. If it's not, then they switch. And that's what I'm
Right.
saying you don't do.
No, because
When you
I
see
I don't
information
have
that
to do
goes
it.
against your
Mhm.
narrative, it becomes skeptical and atheistic and problematic.
No, but all I'm saying is that you gotta allow us to be skeptical, just as you guys are skeptical of the supernatural stuff. Because what we gonna agree.
You can be.
No, but well, that when then allow us the same premise, right, and the same argument.
I will allow the same argument when the argument is based on facts. But your argument is not based on facts, though.
No, but it's based on the same. So here's the thing. So we went through, and this is what the scientists come and say, hey, it's factual. It's 14.5 or 14.8 billion years ago. Now they come and say, hey, you know what happened? There's a star, there's some galaxies that happened afterwards. They like 18. So when now you said this was fact, right? That it was evidence, it was, and you put it almost as truth, we gotta accept it. And now you come late and you tell me, you know what, we gotta review what we did. Probably that wasn't correct. We gotta kind of go back to the drawing board now and review what we said. And
Okay.
I'm like, but we told you that from the beginning. You understand me? We don't believe what you're telling us. But no, it happens and it confirmed, and it's like we told you so.
But it still doesn't. We told you so that you didn't believe it, but you didn't. We told you so that this other option was the right option.
Well, the other option is one based on religion. It's based on
Which is
subjective.
based on belief without facts.
No, it's not. Well, let me put it this way. I can go that way. I can allow you that because having faith is and religion is really subjective. To be honest, it's blind faith. We believe, we trust, and we believe. Right? You're the ones guys who say, okay, you need the evidence before you believe. Correct?
Because then we don't have to believe it.
No, you don't. That's you. Listen,
then
God
it
gave
facts.
Well, no, I'm saying, well, facts are disputable.
No,
so let's
not.
agree on
facts
that.
Are facts.
No, the truth is indisputable. Facts can be challenged and corrected.
Okay, fine. I'll go with that. The truth is, for example, the truth is the Exodus never happened. Truth.
No, come on.
There are zero facts that back up the truth that the Exodus happened.
And what would be one piece of credible information to confirm the Exodus in the skeptic community? Like, just give me something so at least I can go back from our conversation and say, okay, let me see if I can research this. What would make it? Would archaeological finds, historical records, some kind of something like that? What would be?
I'll give you an easy one. I'm not even going to deal with the supernatural bullshit, right? Because the supernatural, you'll never be able to find anything.
No, but Coach, I've been saying that from the beginning. We talking what we can.
Let me get there.
All right, go ahead.
There is zero facts that support the 40 years in the Sinai Peninsula, and there are zero facts that they actually went and conquered Israel, the land of Israel, because the facts are, and the truth is that Egypt controlled the Sinai Peninsula and the Levant during that entire time frame. The entire time frame of the Exodus story, that land was controlled by Egypt.
Right. So let's
Moses and Joshua have done what they did if they were still in Egypt.
Right. So let's just see how we can look at this. Number one, right? Jerusalem existed before the Israelites, right?
I mean, the town was there, yeah, sure.
The city was that. So I tell people
it wasn't called Jerusalem at the time frame, but sure.
Yeah, that's what it was called.
It was called Jebu.
Well, it's saying, well, I've been through the linguistic stuff, no problem. It's Jerusalem. That's my English translation of it. Let's put it that way.
All right, so let's say the city. Let's say Jerusalem. It was there before Israelites. Sure.
Right. Go ahead. Cool. Right. So, do we have archaeological evidence based on biblical references to denote that city was inherited city, and some of the structures in terms of the geological caves and additions and some of these things were there before, predates the actual Jews who were there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right. Now, if we date,
there were Canaanites there.
Right. So if we
ruled by Egypt.
Well, when you say ruled by Egypt, right? This is what I say.
They were like Puerto Rico to America.
They were like, well, you know, Jerusalem was one. They call it the Battle of the Five Kings, right?
The what?
The Battle of the Five Kings in the Bible. I can't remember where it's taken from. Just take my word for it. So it's called the Battle of the Five Kings. So Jerusalem was one of the list there. The five kings that they fought and won. Now, here's my point, because you just wanted. I'm just saying that there are enough biblical evidence, right, to support the fact that, hey, Jerusalem conquered that city during a particular time period.
That Jerusalem conquered that? How can Jerusalem conquer Jerusalem?
No, the Jews conquered the Israelites.
Right. There's no evidence that they conquered Jerusalem during that time frame.
Why is that? You got a whole city. You go down there, the tunnels are there, the inscriptions, all of these things are there today.
The logical conclusion is that they never conquered it during that time frame.
That's the logical conclusion. Come on, coach.
If there's no evidence that they conquered the city during that time frame, why would you then suppose that they conquered the city during that time frame? If all evidence points to the fact that it was controlled by Canaanites who were vassal states of Egypt, why would you assume that?
Right. But okay, so here's my point. What evidence do you have to support what you just told me?
Okay, the Amarna letters.
I don't help you because that
the Meneptah stele.
Right, but that don't help you because if we check back the time frame based on the solar eclipse, it's going to correlate.
There is no, you can't. Your solar eclipse map doesn't go back that far. You got to go back to the 14th century, 14th, 13th, and 12th century. Yours only went back to the 11th century.
Mm-hmm.
Yours went back to, I think the earliest date I saw on yours was
1075, yeah,
which is the 11th century.
Right.
But the time frame of supposedly the Exodus has to be between the 14th and the 12th century. Well, 14th and 14th and 12th century.
Yeah, but you got like a few hundred years after that when all of these settlements are being developed and all these things. But here's my point. The letters.
You're trying to jump out the point. You're trying to jump out the point with it without acknowledging that during that time frame, there is zero evidence to show that Joshua and Moses did any of the things that they claimed that they did at a human level, which is conquering other cities. But
in those records, sorry for cutting you, but in those records, we do, and let me put it this way: each civilization writes their own history how they want it, right? It's only the Jews, right, who sort of blatantly just record what happened, right? And we're gonna be fair with that because the Egyptians do it, the Syrians did it.
Everybody writes my point. History, but archaeology shows that they controlled during that time frame.
No, yeah, but what I'm saying is that those the Myrna, how you pronounce it, the
Amarna
letters, right? In the Amarna letters, there are references to a tribe of Habiru, was it? I forgot the pronunciation.
It's the tribe of the Habiru.
Habiru, right?
And the Habiru. Wait. The Habiru is not a tribe. Habiru is a term that was used to describe marauders, slaves, and dirty people, poor people.
Right. No, there was a rebellion.
Tribe.
Right. What I'm saying is that there was a rebellion by a certain type of people that they described them as, right? So we agree on that.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Right. So this is from their historical information. When you track back that particular thing, and I can't remember, it's been a while since I sort of researched it, because I did do some research on it, and I saw some papers, some guys do on it. It still correlates to the time period lining up scripturally.
No, it doesn't.
So which century do you put it in?
No, it doesn't. Let me tell you why it doesn't correlate. It may correlate as far as time frames.
Right.
But what it doesn't correlate to is that the Hebrew people were the Hebrews. That is the part where the disconnection is.
Right. So we got an argument. One is saying, hey, their records say, hey, we got this rebellion people. They don't going to give much information about it. But anyhow, we got this rebellion happening. in the same place that
It's
we
not,
have
it's
that
not a
we have.
rebellion. You're using terminology that lifts
Uh,
up your claim that is the incorrect terminology. It wasn't rebellions.
well,
These
can,
these people were bandits, and
no matter what you call them,
the,
no matter
the
what you call them,
but
this is all is good in warfare. So
okay,
it
but
doesn't matter.
here's the thing: the vassal kingdoms were saying to the Egyptian pharaoh that, hey, send us some more troops to whoop these people ass, and they whooped their ass. They didn't win all the way to the Meneptah stele in 1204, where Meneptah claimed that he destroyed a group of people called Israelites.
Right.
Right. So they never conquered Jerusalem. According to the biblical story, Joshua conquered the Levant, but they never conquered. Then the archaeological evidence,
right? But coach, one thing I want to
show that they never conquered, and they never took possession of this land until after Egypt was pushed back by the Sea People, and in part of by the Bronze Age collapse, which began around 1100 in the 1100s BCE, and you didn't get an establishment of an Israelite kingdom until right now until around the 800 BCE. So
right.
there's a gap where
Yeah, but coach, yeah, I'm not going to point out to you what you're doing is collectively using one source and you planting
actually this is
other
multiple
historical gaps.
this is multiple sources, my guy.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying, you stitching them together to create your narrative as well.
No, I'm not
so what
stitching
I'm
together
saying,
to create my narrative. It's just what it is. See, that's the part that you don't get. I state just what it is. If the evidence showed that in the in the 1200s and 1300s that the Israelites conquered the Levant as the Bible claims, then I would say the Bible's right. Joshua conquered, the Danites conquered and enslaved the people. I would agree to that. But the evidence doesn't show that they conquered that land. The evidence showed that there were some bandits,
what
but the
you
bandits
arguing?
never won.
Oh, wait, your argument is not that it didn't. I am saying that it happened, right? Your argument is whether it happened in the time, right? That's the in the year that's the argument
It
because
has
I'm
to happen
saying
in the time frame.
no,
Otherwise, it's false.
no. But what I'm saying is this, right? That's where we started off from, right? You're saying that hey, before the 1075, which from there come forward, it's almost bulletproof, right? And you're saying prior to that, some of the same information from the scripture, since I didn't provide that information before, or we can't get it as yet, that hey, this is all circumstantial and it didn't happen or it wasn't correct based on the time factor that you're using. I'm saying, okay, well, what's your information from? And you're quoting some historical and you're stitching together some other folks. Because I know those records don't say all of what you just said, but I'll leave it for what it is.
Yes,
It's
they
not.
do.
No, I don't say it. It didn't state all of what you just said. I'm just saying I understand the narrative, what you're saying. I understand the point. So what you're saying is that, hey, based on what evidence that you're quoting from, right? That the time frame is incorrect, right? So before the 11th century, you're saying the time frame is incorrect, not the fact that the actual Israelites didn't conquer these cities because we have evidence that they did. So I'm saying I'm taking your point of okay, I can't or we can't at this point, let's say without bulletproof evidence like my solar eclipses, that I can't say, okay, this happened, what happened? But I'm saying, okay, fine, right? But let's leave that up just like in your community when the scientists change their mind, right? And update their stuff. So I'm saying I'm gonna leave it. I'm hearing your argument. I'm gonna
But
leave it.
no, you're
And we
not.
could always circle back, right?
You're missing a very fine point of the argument.
Okay, go ahead.
In the same way that you're saying that your solar eclipses that denote when certain kings were in rulership is bulletproof, and I'll grant you that. But what I'm saying as far as who was in control of the Levant during those time frames which the Israelites claim that they took control of it, the information is bulletproof that they did not take those lands, that they did not conquer the people that they claim to have conquered. That is bulletproof. It is only through an apologist's eyes that there is any skepticism towards it, because you want to force the biblical narrative. But
I'm not forcing the narrative.
No, you're forcing the narrative because you want to leave that information as skeptical information, whereas that information is not skeptical.
No,
it
I'm
is
just
bulletproof and known who controlled that land during the time frame that Moses and Joshua supposedly did their conquering.
Right. So here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. And this is what I'm saying. On one hand, you're saying, hey, prior to the 11th century, you're saying nothing, right? And this is how you have stated it before. Nothing, everything is uncircumcised. There's not enough evidence to
No, I'm saying it's all false.
Right. Nothing is to confirm. But from the 11th century, when we can pinpoint, when we can correlate scientific evidence, right, and historical facts archaeologically, everything is okay. All what the Bible been saying, right?
Not all what the Bible been saying, but the kingships and rulerships, I will give you that.
We're not talking about the supernatural stuff. We're talking historical references and data, places, times, events. That's what we're talking about.
Sure.
I'm not coming from you from a spiritual. Good. So I haven't come to you with that, never came with you that way, right? So all I'm saying is that, hey, if it is from 1075, right, which is the first date that I have for the solar eclipses, and I'm saying, hey, and you're agreeing with me coming down, that junk of information there is a lot of biblical evidence to now confirm, and we can now correlate that, hey, what the Bible was saying all along is correct. It's been challenged. Now we can use your community scientific data that they like to use to now confirm some of this stuff, and it does confirm it. Anyone can go up and investigate and confirm it now.
I have always stood on the firm foundation that those things are valid in the Bible. That's why I will say over and over again that 99% of the Bible is bullshit, but it does have its 1% of things that are accurate. And that would be the places and names of kings is valid.
Correct.
But beyond that scope of things, that's it.
Right. But what would it, let's put it this way. Of all the historical references that we have, right? So we got the Jewish, Bible, the Tanakh that has their records, Assyrians, Persians, Egyptian, right? If I line them up all together, all that we have, and maybe the Tanakh is maybe the most, let's say, open one, right? Because it's been talked about, discussed generations upon generation. The Egyptians, maybe a little bit not. Persians, you got to read hieroglyphics and all kind of stuff. Here's my point. Who would I believe if I put up all of them together, and I'm reading from a historical perspective, right? From which one? Who is more open about events, places, times, cities, tongues, events? Who is more open? Let's be real. You're going to have to vote the Bible and say the Tanakh has been the one that would be more open. They didn't hide anything. They said they were conquered by so-and-so. They went into slavery so-and-so. What we questioning is whether or not what that person said is correct. But in the Egyptians, we know that they themselves changed their times and added all kind of different stuff. We know that.
Hold on.
Which records are more open and fair? Let's answer that question. That's my question. Which one of them? Which civilization?
I would say that they are all relatively equal. The Egyptians had no problems talking about when they were conquered by the Kush. The Egyptians had no problems talking about when they were conquered by the Hyksos. They had no problems talking about when they were conquered by the Assyrians, when they were conquered by the Babylonians and the Persians, and when they were conquered by the Greeks and the Romans. They have no problems talking about when they were conquered.
But coach, not cutting you, but these same people became pharaohs. They became the leaders. They became de facto people etched in the Egyptian history.
And so you don't think that, okay, so the stories of King David and King Solomon and all of them, there's no proof that those people ever actually existed.
Nah, we have proof of House of David. Come on,
No,
Jehu and
no,
all
that just says House of David. We don't know the
House
extent
of
of that.
David. House of David. Come on. Well,
That's
if you're a king,
one little piece of
well,
evidence
say,
that just says that there was a House of David, but
Ju-
and that House of David was conquered.
House of Omri, Jehu. Come on, we got the steely collections that we ain't going there. Come on, coach. Come on. Grant me that. Grant me that.
During the Bronze Age collapse, there could have been a House of David. Mm-hmm. Did that House of David, was it as extensive as the Bible proclaims it? There's no evidence of that. And what it shows is that the House of David was conquered. According to the Bible, the House of David was not conquered. Am I wrong?
If the House of David was conquered, well, it depends in what terminology you mean.
No,
he was conquered. He was conquered.
The Bible never proclaimed. David won. David created the so-called great kingdom of Israel.
Yeah. But there are times he lost. There are couple battles he lost. Yeah, couple battles he lost.
There's evidence. There is evidence that there may have been a House of David, but there's no evidence that the House of David conquered to the extent that he claims, because this House of David would have been established during the Bronze Age collapse. Right.
But we have
many different warlords and little kingdoms that was popping up during that time frame.
Right, but we got, come on, coach.
It wasn't until the Assyrians got their shit together and then conquered all of the Levant and into Egypt.
Yeah, that's after David. That's how many years after. I'm not saying that didn't happen.
But that's what I'm saying. There's not enough evidence to show that David conquered to the extent that David claims, that the Bible claims.
Okay, well, let's just say that's subjective. We can. I'm not going to argue.
Subjective. That's my point. None of that is subjective.
Wait. Let me put it this way.
Evidence that David conquered the extent that he conquered outside of the Bible.
Well, let me go even further back, and that's why I say keep it. The most northern Israel tribe was the tribe of Dan, right? Which borders Syria and what you call this place today, the North Golan Heights up there. They built a separate temple where they worship. It's still there up to today, and that was since the time of Joshua's time. And I'm talking about when they separated. I forgot the name of the little town. You can actually go there and do some.
The most northern tribe was the tribe of Asher.
Asher was big, but Dan is to the north. They had
Dan was to the south and
south. No, north. Dan was north.
Well, Dan was actually in the middle and towards the. Let me just show you.
Yeah, no problem. I could be correct. I got no problem. Give me what's. Ooh, man, that's small. I'll pull it up. That's not. Hold 1 sec. I'll get what I'm coming.
You can't see that.
I can see it, but I got glasses. Hold 1 sec. Here's my point, right? No problem. I could be corrected on which tribe. What I'm getting at is this: the northern tribe, which was Israel, right, had their own temple. They had like a little shrine thing, whatever. And I'm saying, the archaeologists found the city, found the place, and I'm just using this as a talking point reference, just to say this, right? You have the mentions of the names of House of David, right? You have the names of Omri, which are successors from David, and also Jehu, right? As well in this steel etched in stone. So we can't get away from that. I'm not gonna bother. I'm not gonna even take you challenging that. Here's my point that I'm zeroing in back in. So let's zero back in. All we are saying is that from 11 come forward, 11th century, Bible is correct. Chronologically, events, dates, times, persons, characters, all of these things are good to go. Nobody gonna question them.
Not the 11th century. The 11th century would put it in 10,000.
Yeah, 1070. 10,
no.
One.
I would say the 8th century, slightly 9th century, which would put it in the 700s and 800s BCE.
We got solar eclipses in 1036. That's what I'm telling you in Mesopotamia. We can correlate some of these things.
Now, Solomon's temple was supposedly built in the 10th century, and then destroyed in the 6th century.
Yeah, we can confirm all of that. We got. Listen, that's the Babylonians. The Babylonians.
I will give you the 11th century because Um, it is possible that there was a temple in Jerusalem
Yeah,
that was Solomon's temple, which is supposedly
586.
the oldest temple.
No, 586. We got the Babylonian records that show that they conquered Jerusalem. He
I
made
know
3
that
trips.
I just said that
Oh,
the
okay.
Babylonians destroyed his temple in 586.
Right. So, and if we count, right, from some, if we use Bible numbers, some of the dating, we can go back and get these dates, coach. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that the use of the solar eclipses has become so important now that it's like, okay, if you go against me, fine, but go against NASA too, because they're the one who confirming the very same events that occurred in not only the Bible, but also some of the same historical records of some of these civilizations.
Okay, but okay. We're going one, we're going in circles. And
Yeah, I know.
2, let me clarify that I just looked up the oldest Israelite temple in Syria, and there
Mhm.
isn't one.
No,
Okay.
I'll pull it up for you. I'll pull it up for you.
Well,
No
I
problem.
just pulled it up. So isn't one. Now,
No, there is, coach. Come on.
hold on.
I got no
Hold on.
problem with you
Now
challenging me.
there is a synagogue in Jabbar that is associated with the prophet Elijah. But there's no archaeological data that actually demonstrate that was a Jewish temple. So you're making confirmation of something that has not yet been confirmed.
Yes, I'll find it for you, coach. No problem. I will find, actually there's a video on it as well. I'll
Because
find it. I'll
that
find it
is
on.
the claim that is a Israelite temple is a tradition, not a
No. Understand what I'm saying? And when the tribes of the 10 tribes went, uh, the 10 northern tribes went on their own, and you had Judah and the Levites remain, and some of the Benjamites, right? In terms of the Judah, the kingdom, right? The Israelites constructed their own temple during that time. That's why you have all of these prophets, right, that were sent to them in the scripture. Half of Isaiah and Jeremiah, Amos, Habakkuk, or some of all of these people are talking to Israel because of their apostasy and them worshiping stuff. But I'll bring it for you. Give me one
as,
sec.
as a matter of fact, it says
Mhm.
that synagogue has a plaque in it stating that it was built in 720 BCE.
Mhm. And I don't know what you're talking about in terms of the reference.
I'm talking about the oldest Jewish, what is
No.
held as the
No,
oldest Jewish temple in Syria. That's what you claim. You said
no,
that
no, no. What
they
I'm
built a
claiming,
temple in Syria that's still there today.
no, what I'm claiming is, and you went. Remember the question I asked you? What would be some type of evidence to show that
Oh, that's what I said.
Joshua? Right. So I'm
There is,
saying that
there isn't any, is what I'm saying.
no, there is. I'll give it back to you. Just we in the heat of the moment and the discussion. I'll find it and I'll drop you. I'll drop you the link in the comments, and I'll provide. I have my receipt. I ain't
Um,
like this just
you
person's talk.
look, you got some shit that I used to do back in the day, which is create some receipts for tax.
No. I
It's
remember.
tax season.
No. There's actually the tribes of the north actually had a fake temple, right? Back in the read the Bible. Come on, you read the Bible and you forget you read it the last.
Okay, but see, that's the thing. The Bible claiming things that happened during a time frame that they weren't in control of those lands.
Mhm.
Just because if the Bible claims it, but there's no archaeology to back it up,
But that's what I'm saying.
then it just becomes
I'll
what the Bible
grant you.
said.
Right. So
And that
what
is
I'm
why I
saying.
use Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Just because Homer found Troy doesn't mean Achilles existed. You're
Well,
claiming that they built a temple, but the temple is not built at the time frame of Joshua or even before.
right. So here was my point. What I'm
It's
trying
not
to
built
stop.
till way after the time frame of Joshua in the
No,
8th century.
right. So here's my point. What I'm trying to articulate. That place, I'm gonna bring it for you. Give me. It just slipped me. Right. It should be in my notes somewhere there. I'm just talking live, so I don't want to go into waste no time with it. I'll drop it in the links, in the link, and you know I got my receipt, right? So just like I got my receipts now, so I'll bring it and I'll show you, no problem. All right.
Okay,
So
but
so we going in circles. So
so
let's
is
let's
this what
let's
you
see if we
call a
can.
victory? You called a victory the fact that you established that something that I've always said is that if you're looking from the 700s BCE and sometimes in the 800s BCE, that these kings existed, that these cities existed,
Mhm.
I will grant you that. But you're taking a victory lap as if that means that all of what the Bible says is correct. Now, the reason why I say that you look at it through the apologist lens is because, oh, the Bible said it. Here's some proof that these cities existed. So the Bible is correct. But if the Egyptians say that they controlled this land during the time frame the Bible says that Joshua controlled this land, oh, the Egyptians are corrupt. They just didn't want to write the truth, and so on and so forth. That's bias as hell, my guy.
No, no, it's the same. It's the same premise that the skeptics use. Come on, man.
But you're not
What?
skeptical of your own information.
What? Listen, I didn't claim. So here's my point. From since the last occasion to now, all I claim was, hey, from the time of where I have bulletproof evidence and support with dates and scientific evidence that I could now pinpoint from this period come forward. So let's just say for the 2000 years before that I don't have it and I can do it. I'm not here to tell you it's correct. What I'm here to say is, hey, from the point of, let's say, the 11th century, when we can now correlate some of the historical data from these other civilizations, that, hey, the Bible is chronologically correct. So I'm saying if half, more than half of the biblical narrative and history happens between that 11th century up until 70 AD, let's put it that way, then we got a chunk of time where we can now look at and say, hey, can we question the Bible and say, hey, they talked about this city, they talked about this king. We can now go back and correlate in those external sources, the Syrians, the Persians, the Egyptians, and see if what the Bible said was correct. And I'm saying, if it's correct, it's correct, and you guys can't question it.
And we don't. But first of all, it's not half of the timeline. To go from the 8th century BCE to 70 CE is not half of the timeline when the timeline supposedly goes back to 4,400 or 4,600 and something BCE.
Right, give or take 3,000. I'm saying 3,000 years before, right, up until now, we have information that can now be substantiated.
You're looking at less than 1,000 years compared to
That's half.
to almost
Biblical.
4,000 years.
No, I'm
No,
saying the biblical narrative is like the
so
6,000 years, right?
a
Average.
quarter of the time frame. You got a quarter of the time frame that the biblical
Which whenever
is
you comfortable
historical
with.
as far as kings and cities.
Okay, which whenever you comfortable with, I'll go with that. So it's a quarter,
But the
no problem.
Egyptians got like 6,000 to 7,000 years that is
Nah, we don't
historically
take them
bulletproof.
on. They listen. They still gotta be fact checked. We know they tampered
Okay,
with their own
so you're
history.
saying
So
that we know the time frame of King of Pharaoh Meneptah, right? Pharaoh Meneptah is the 13th century BCE. We know that's Meneptah's time. He's in that time frame, the latter half of the 1300 BCE. Bulletproof. We know he was Pharaoh. Meneptah fought this.
how do
Meneptah
we know
fought
that?
a Syrian.
What's the evidence? That's tell me it. I'm just being facetious. Come on.
We got tablets. We got pottery. We got hieroglyphs. We got their kings list. We got the births of deaths of other pharaohs. We know
Okay,
when
all right,
Meneptah
okay.
was Pharaoh.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
And
Make your point.
Meneptah inscribes that he defeated all these city states and nations and a people group called Israelites in 1204.
Mm-hmm.
And he called them a people group, not a nation, meaning that they were just a little tribe of people running around. But according to the Joshua story, they were enacting a kingdom at that time frame.
So here's my
their inheritances.
So here's my point, Coach. I'm not going to dispute anything beyond that I can't have enough information to validate. I'm saying you realize I'm using from, I could go use my 8th century. Even if I be, more concise with it, from the 8th century. And I'm saying until before, it's open season, fine. The skeptics can say whatever, it never happened. Da, da, da. I got no problem with that. I'm just saying from the 8th century, right? What we have is a lot of historical facts and data, a lot of civilizations coming in, a lot of information that the Bible gives that can now be factual.
And so can Manasseh. He can be factual. He's factual based on Assyrian writings. He's factual based on Hittite writings. He's factual based on most of that Western Mediterranean writings of other civilizations. He's factual. The Bronze Age collapse, factual. The Sea People, factual.
Right.
But
so I'm saying up until so listen. Right. So here's what I'm saying. Up until, right, if that's what you guys say, hey, this is factual, okay, I can run with it. I'm not saying no. I'm just looking from a biblical narrative, right, in terms of what can be validated. So I've never come before. You realize I've never, in all of the discussions before, I never come to say, hey, I didn't even say put the Exodus part. I've never dealt with it because I know it's numbers. People would add the numbers together based on the rulership of the kingdoms and the kings, and you can get the time frame. I know it's there, and as far as I'm concerned, it's okay. But I don't have something that's like the NASA evidence there. You know what? If I calculate some type of eclipse, some record that I can validate it with, right? That they're not gonna say, hey, it's arguable. Then, so just like you can accept after from the 8th century come forward, and it's all good. I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna let you slide before, and you say whatever you want to say. I ain't got no problem with it until I can bring the evidence. Fine, say what you gotta say, but you gotta admit that based on what I've presented and what we spoke about, that is bulletproof.
I don't disagree with, well, not all that we've spoken about, but I do not disagree that those were the kings and those were the cities. I will grant you that.
Right.
But what you won't grant me is the fact that prior to that, those what they claim, what the Bible claims to have been controlling, and what Moses and Joshua and the Abrahamic story, the story of Abraham and all of that, that it actually flies contrary to history.
And I'm saying
there's been no proof. Thousands of years have went by, no proof.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm letting you slide with it. And that's what I said.
I'm sliding with it.
Yeah, we slide.
What proof do you have that the Exodus happened?
No, so that's what I'm saying. I can just use tongues, cities, and dates and stuff like that to come up from the biblical evidence to say it. And I'm saying, since we're discussing, you realize I've never tried to prove that. You agree, right? I never did. You were the one who you were the one who keeps pressing with the Exodus, right? You realize that. I know that's your winning point, right? But I'm just
and here's why. If there is no Exodus, then your claims of Yahweh fall apart.
No, Yahweh always existed.
You can't prove it.
I gotta prove God to you.
Without Moses, you don't get, without Moses and Abraham and Noah and all that, you don't get Yahweh in the form that the Israelite people had made him into be in the 8th century BCE. You have, those stories have to stand and be testable in order for the rest of the story to fit.
No, we got inscriptions that call the God of the Hebrews Yahweh. I can't remember which one it is. I know you're gonna ask me. Whenever I ask you, you just tell me and I accept.
Yeah, I mean, but what you're talking about, okay, so you said that they claim the Lord of the Hebrews is Yahweh. I mean, I know you got the Moabite stone, but that's talking about that's the Moabite people worshiping Yahweh. You got the Shashu people worshiping Yahweh. You see, the problem that you
No, but
won't
you know Moab, but you
and
know Moab
Yahweh,
and Moab and
Yahweh is a
Ammon.
God of
Mhm.
other people's pantheons.
No, but you know the Moabites and the Ammonites were cousins. They were Lot's descendants, right?
The Moabites, yes, supposedly comes from Lot's first daughter.
Right, right. So
Supposedly.
right. So that's Abraham's nephew. So you think they're gonna serve a different God? They knew. I'm
Okay,
just saying that they,
that's you implementing your Bible into a group of people that you have no proof that those people come from Lot and the incestuous relationship with his daughter.
okay. So
You have to, and that's what I'm saying. If
mhm,
if there's no proof of Lot,
mhm.
then you can't make the claim that the
Today,
Moabites
you
come
know,
from Lot.
today the cave that Lot fled to during the time of Sodom and Gomorrah is still there today, right? You know, there's I
There's a
think
cave that they just claim, but
yeah,
there's
they
no
call it
evidence that that
no, yeah,
cave
but
is actually Lot. There's no bones, there's
no,
no
they yeah, I
pottery,
know, but what
nothing.
I'm saying is this is where we come down to information. The people of the place there calls it that, right? And if I remember the city that was spared, I think it was Zoaz, right? Zoaz still there today. So if it is, and this is my point, if it is that Sodom and Gomorrah never existed or whatever never happened, what I'm saying is this: the writer of the excerpt, right, is given certain information that can be tested, and that's my point. So go
Okay.
beyond the supernatural and let's
So
just deal with what we have as the
okay.
physical, and that's my
So
point because
just like Sean just posted, I think I'm gonna go off of what Sean just posted here.
yeah,
Mount Olympus still exists today, right?
correct, yeah.
So is Zeus and all of them up on top of Mount Olympus?
No, I'm just kidding with you. I'm
Just
just being
because a
facetious.
city and some caves still exist has nothing to do
No, but what I'm
with
saying is, coach,
the
yeah, but
people.
listen, yeah, but coach, we gotta have deductive reasoning. So if I read that's not if I read the
But you
excerpt,
don't.
but wait, coach, if it is that this information is false, right? And I can pinpoint certain information that the author wrote to say, let me just see if this guy talking foolishness, if this is real or not. Okay, Zoaz. Do we have a place called Zoaz? Like, oh yeah, you know, there's a place called that was spared, the city, right? It's still there. If I'm not mistaken, I remember seeing a guy that's Expedition Bible. They do a lot of research and some of that. He did like a big exposition on it. The father and the son. I know they evangelical apologists, archaeologists, but no, I've been fair. Coach, have I been fair and straightforward always? You laughing. I'm telling
I
you,
am.
I'm telling you. So I ain't got no problem with it, right? So I'm just saying that hey, when you question it, right? And I'm saying, does the Bible now give references to some of these places and tongues, and are they correct? And it's
Oh
correct.
gosh, yes, okay. And so does Mount Olympus, and so does the little Snake Mountain up in Michigan, Wyoming somewhere, and so does Mount Kilimanjaro, and every other place that people claim divinity or some miraculous event. All those places still exist,
Right?
and if
So
all
is the
so
author telling an untruth in terms of because that's what we could test, right? I'm saying let's test, pull out from the scriptures what we can test and put it to the test. If it is that he named a place and like, no, that place not there, there's no name, there's no record of that place there, then we can say, hey, something's wrong here. This not correct. But if all through the scriptures you realize places, tongues, cities, characters, events happened, right? Outside, I'm not talking about the supernatural stuff. That's what the skeptics always look at. They always quote the supernatural stuff.
because without the supernatural, your religion has no teeth.
But why it is when we provide to you the physical, you got no problem. You stay quiet, like, yeah, no problem. I got no problem. So you got no problem with let's say before Jesus, 800 years of data and reference points that you can say, yeah, that was real. Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar did come and he did destroy the temple. Yeah, that
Yeah.
happened.
Okay.
Right.
That happened.
And there was some people named Israel. There was a country called Israel.
That's fine.
Right. Good.
But
and we can now check
in
in the Babylonian records to verify, yeah, what the Bible is saying is correct.
So then when the Babylonians say that Marduk is correct and that he killed Tiamat to create the earth, then that's correct too, right?
When who? Repeat
That
that.
Marduk killed Tiamat to
Who
create
said
the
that?
earth.
Who said that?
Babylonians.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we know Babylon existed, right?
Correct.
We know the Babylonian Empire existed, right?
Right.
Their kings existed.
Mm-hmm.
So since Babylon existed, their kings existed.
It's a real place. It's a real place. It's a real place. It's a real place. It's a real civilization. But I'm throwing out the supernatural. And that's what I've done all through. That's
so that means
point.
that the Babylonian record is correct then, right?
As far as places, names, cities, events that has happened.
Okay. But
that's what the Bible uses.
Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Then why don't you believe in the Babylonian gods?
If I don't believe, or if I believe in the Babylonian gods,
why don't you believe in their gods? If their cities and their kings and places are correct in history and it's supported by outside sources, why don't you believe in their gods?
I'm trying to remember what's the name of the Babylonian. Wasn't
Marduk. Marduk was the primary god. He's the big G.
Yeah, and there were some others. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
So why don't you believe in their
right? But wait. Some of these, were they the god of the heaven? They were gods of celestial and earthly man-made stuff.
Anu and Tiamat were the celestial god and goddess who created the universe.
Right, so, they celestial. Right,
so why don't you believe it? But their landmarks and their kings are proven history.
Right, and all I'm doing, right. So listen, as I said.
So why don't you believe? No, why?
I'm being consistent. I'm being consistent. So listen, I've been consistent. We throwing out the supernatural on either side. All I am looking for is what I can prove and test.
So you don't.
You gotta agree,
then, right?
What's that?
You don't believe in Yahweh.
Yeah, I said my belief in Yahweh is subjective.
But you can't. Earlier. So you believe it's subjective.
Yeah, meaning it's me. It's my biased opinion of it. Right?
Okay, then that's fine. You have a right to believe in whatever.
Yeah, just like you got a right to not believe. So
but that doesn't make. But you should. But the fact that you want other people to believe it based on cities and states and kingship.
No, all I'm doing. Listen, Coach. All I'm doing is saying, and this is what we do. You look at the same information that you're reading from, right? And you're challenging us with, and we're looking at it like, okay, when the Bible says Nebuchadnezzar come, did he really come? Did he really come on the show? So I'm saying there's this. We got a whole book, Jeremiah, right? Jeremiah lived during the time of the Babylonian and the Persian rule, right? In his book, he got don't worry, we can get into that. In his book, right? He writes and he tells them, hey, the somebody from the east gonna come and destroy you all. His name Nebuchadnezzar, he gonna come. They didn't listen, So we got a whole book that spans a period of time of a prophet telling them from since, because he was before. He was from Josiah's son's time. So the sons of Josiah straight down to the last king, which was Zedekiah. He is there. Babylon comes. So we got a book, and I'm saying in this book, it's like, oh, Nebuchadnezzar, did he really do this? And I'm saying, let's take out the supernatural on either side. I go to the Babylonian records. Does it say that this event happened? That he visited 3 times? And did it happen? Yes.
Yeah, it happened when you're writing a book after you're editing a book and writing a book after the events happen. Sure.
Come on, Coach. We got Herodotus and the other one doing the same thing. They making change and update stuff. Come on.
That is bulletproof evidence. There is bulletproof evidence that in the 5th and 4th century, all the way up to the 2nd century, that the Old Testament Torah book was being edited. So to edit it to say that these things, that Jeremiah said these things, or Daniel said these things, or Isaiah said these things, it is proven that much of these sayings, these prophecies were written after the events happened, which is why they get it wrong after this time frame.
No, it doesn't. And that's the reason.
And people just They just add. That was the Romans then.
No. So actually, one of the purpose of my timelines, actually, in the timeline with the eponym records, right? And that's solar eclipse, right? I can now use, right, the same records that I quoted, same solar eclipses, put the dates in, and now see if what Jeremiah and Daniel were saying about the Messiah to come, right, in terms of the date he was supposed to appear.
Jeremiah and Daniel were not talking about a Messiah that turned out to be Jesus. They were
Daniel chapter 9 has it.
They were talking about King Ahaz's son.
No, that's before.
They said that the original
Isaiah.
The original writing said a young maiden has given birth.
No, you're talking about
the original didn't say that she will give birth.
No, that's more than 200 years before. You're mixing it up. Daniel comes way after that. In fact, Daniel and Jeremiah lived around the same time. Daniel was after. He was his contemporary.
Non-biblical scholarship has already shown that they were not talking about Jesus.
Wait. So they must listen.
Here's the big thing. It's been 3 hours.
I know. It's content.
I have not had a bathroom break, and it is time for me to spend time with my wife. So
I know. so let me just slip this in, right? So let me just tell you, right? Let me correct you on that part, right? Daniel comes after Jeremiah. He lives longer than Jeremiah. He comes and he gives the prophecy. So I'll tell you one of the reasons why I have this timeline is that I can calculate from Daniel's prophecy at the 70 weeks prophecy of when the Messiah is supposed to appear, and it fits to a T. If you go back, you'll realize when I go down the 80-27, I can now recalculate that time. That's last time I think I told you, but it must have kind of slipped over. So I'm just saying that's one of the reasons why I have the timeline, that I can now proof research to say, hey, was there really a Messiah? Did he appear when he was supposed to appear? How come in the Bible we got people from the east saying we see the star of the Messiah in the sky and we have come to look for him? Anyhow, coach, let me let you go.
I got to use the bathroom and talk to my wife. So
no, we go.
Get into that level of that debate because
we conversate.
That last word.
And conversating.
Encourage you to do some research outside of apologetics because you are sorely mistaken, sir. But
I brought my receipts. I'll give you the tongue that I'm talking about.
Your receipts have been weighed, they have been measured, and they have been found wanting.
Never. You quoting Daniel. Come on.
No, sir. Your receipts.
That's right. No. Listen, this is the second time I come up, and time,
the second time that your information is not valid, does not validate the Bible as being a book that you should worship Yahweh. It is just that it is on the same level of any other writings that tries to establish itself as a truth based on naming places that existed. Hell, Spider-Man met President Obama and lived in New York City.
Would you agree that the Bible do contain historical events and dates and characters?
And that does not make it a valid book of Yahweh.
Has the information been tested enough to say that it is correct based on what it's saying?
It has been tested enough to say that it is wrong.
No,
the overwhelming majority of the Bible has been tested, weighed, and found wanting that it is wrong as hell.
No, I can say that. I can say that about Amenhotep and Herodotus and all these other secular people who were puppets of these dynasties that wrote all kind of stuff that you guys believe in.
You have your apologetic lens on, and that's fine, and I will let you have that. My channel is not here to convince people.
No, we're not here to know. We just conversating. No. Listen, I grant you yours. You gotta. All I'm saying, grant us ours. That's all.
I did. Yeah. I granted you that those kings and those cities existed, but that doesn't mean any. That doesn't mean a whole lot.
It means
it doesn't carry. It doesn't carry the weight that you think it carries.
No, because let's put it this way. You would say,
I gotta go.
Yeah. All right, okay.
Plain and simple. I gotta use the restroom.
Next time, whenever you got
about that.
I'm next time
twitching my legs and everything. So,
go ahead.
I love everybody. Y'all have a great.
Tell them, Mrs. I say hello. Anyhow,
I will tell her. Y'all have a great night. Always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good night.
I read your Bible, pray every day. Jesus
Don't
coming
read that
soon.
bullshit. Now